document. This shit is dope. Are you watching it? Are people saying anything? Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to some. Good evening to others. Welcome to another episode of This is Revolution podcast. I am your host, Jason Miles. And first and foremost, I want to say a very huge thank you to TIR crew member Jeremy Salmon for hooking up another movie night. I had a blast. I'm really glad we watched Free State of Jones. That was my first time watching it. A few other people, that was their first time watching it. What I really loved about the whole movie night experience is after the movie, we're doing it on Discord so we can see each other and we have this great conversation. So thank you guys for participating in that. That was actually a real ton of fun. It definitely inspired me when I was putting together a lot of the stuff for this show to make sure this show is bomb. So also, I want to send a belated birthday shout out to, I want to do this on the main show, to TIR crew member Stefan. Stefan turned 27 a couple days ago. So happy birthday, Stefan. Hopefully you're watching back home in Wales. And let me bring in my Saturday crew member, my homie. He's also my dog. You know why? Because he is, or was, the black man in Maine. Now he just is another chocolate droplet in the chocolate city of Virginia. Please welcome Marcus of the Left Flank Bets.
Well, thank you. And chocolate droplet. That was my stage name when I used to. We don't got to talk about it too
much. I found footage. I believe they're your people that do that dance. Is it called stabbing? Where they totally like jerk their weenies.
Oh.
I think that's a Jamaican thing.
There's a lot of things that go on in Jamaican clubs that wouldn't even be fit for like BET Uncut.
I was this close to sending it to you. I was dicking around on the internet waiting for something to download, and I was like, holy shit, I think these are all Marcus's cousins.
I remember, like, I went to, this is probably when I was like 18. But like we went, you know, like my family, like we went back to Jamaica for a bit. And yeah, I went to a club with a few of my cousins, and like I just spent the whole time like like it was wild. It was sweaty in there. It was real sweaty in there.
You didn't know if you don't hit them with the bing bang, then they're not feeling you.
It's a good time.
Hey, my homegirl was on that Black Jesus show. Shout out to Kenzo Shibata in the chat. The one and only Kenzo Shibata, the Kenzo Shibata Show. So how are you doing, Marcus, on this anniversary of the LA riots? Because it was going on today as well.
Yeah, which, I don't know. Maybe it should be like a multi-day thing. Like LA should have turned it into like a Mardi Gras thing, right?
Mhm.
They should have really made lemonade. And then every year you just have a few days where everybody just has some parties, you know what I'm saying? Guys just, waving their balls around or something for some beads.
I gotta find that video. I had a couple different trigger warning things I was gonna do. I sent you the questions and the
He
intro.
called the baton swings, right?
Is that what they're called?
Of I was just
They
saying,
call
like,
baton swing? Is that what you call them in your house?
no, well, I'm just
Don't let me get the baton out.
that
Don't you let girl.
could be the thing. No, I'm doing good, and also I'm very, very interested to actually even just have this conversation with you, because there's a lot of different dynamics in there, and it's like anything and everything, there's like these broad brush that get painted over like what happened, and there's like obviously there's things to this day that are very, very relevant to what happened then, and what we should be doing, or what we could be doing to prevent these things, and understanding that it's not like a light switch, right? Like, none of these fixes to the issues that we're going to be discussing, whether it is internal racial tensions between different
Yeah.
communities of color, or the dynamics of policing, or just economic opportunity, and what the lack of that can mean for a community. It's like there's a lot of work to be done, but happy to have the discussion, right, about all this stuff.
And it kind of, it really prompted me to do this. I mentioned this on the show last night. Well, the patron only movie night, excuse me, that we had last night was that really, like, okay, I got to do this. The NFL for the draft is there's so much propaganda in sports nowadays. It blows my mind. First of all, someone brought up it was my daughter's boyfriend that reminded me of the fact that Kyrie Irving is Muslim, and he went off on one of the playoff games, and they were like, "Can you believe Irving is doing this during Ramadan?"
Oh
He's
my
not the first Muslim player, but now that's they're so inclusive, right?
He's the first Muslim to ever yell during Ramadan.
So
Though.
so
It's pretty disrespectful.
Keyshawn, for the draft, they did a whole remembering the riots thing. And Keyshawn Johnson, who was an LA native, was talking about being in LA during the riots. And then he was talking about how much has changed. And a lot has changed. I believe he actually is from South Central. If he's not from South Central, I believe he might be from Long Beach. And a lot has changed, but he's talking about helmet stickers and the NFL acknowledgement that Black Lives Matter, if that means
Yeah.
And so someone had said, are you going to do anything about the LA riot? I believe they said they're LA riots as well. And my first thing was like, I don't know. And then after I saw it, I was like, yes, I have to, because I don't want people to keep looking at this through a certain lens of strictly racial tension. First of all, we cannot deny the fact that racial tension in Los Angeles in the 90s, the only thing that rivaled it was probably New York in the 80s. And LA had a black mayor for decades, had black people in city council way longer than New York City. And in making the intro clip, I had found some footage months ago. If you know me personally, you know that I love true crime. And if you know that I love true crime, you know my favorite reporter is Bill Curtis. You may know Bill Curtis as the narrator for the movie Anchorman. He really was a reporter. He was one of the reporters that was breaking or covering Charles Manson in LA. He might have covered another big case. Whatever. I think he was probably gone by the time the Night Stalker happened. But anyway, kind of a big time reporter, even on a national scale. And he's got this great voice. Bill Curtis did a news story in 1971 about black ass Compton. And it's literally called Black City or Compton, Black City from 1971. And he's doesn't necessarily have a class critique because, again, this is 1971. This is coming on the heels of the Moynihan Report. So everything he's asking people, black or white, there's a lot of white people he's talking to in it, and it's about an hour and some change, isn't the problem these defective Negroes because they can't blame us this time? And that's constantly what he's trying to say. Like, hey, it's Negroes in council. I don't remember if Bradley was mayor yet, but they're buying homes because we're letting them, and they're effing up their own neighborhood. He does not have a very apt critique of the fact that major industrial centers that brought this labor in the first place, black people just don't move to LA for the surf and tacos. They move there because it is a very large industrial center. Same thing with where I'm from in Richmond, California. Extremely large industrial center that's manufacturing ships and planes and then later cars. So that's why you have so many people generally from the same region of the South.
And I mean, it's like Cleveland, Detroit, or like other fucking.
Yeah, as you know, right? I'm sure you met a lot of.
Oh my god! And like that's the thing, is like seeing Detroit or seeing Cleveland, like late '90s, early 2000s. Like it is like it's I don't know. It's like it's just like you go to like some of these like places that are just like completely been like pretty much like hollowed out.
Oh, yeah. Kenzo says Chicago.
Oh,
of course.
where?
Right?
Where?
But LA and where I'm from are port cities, right? So that's another very important thing. These are major port cities. So longshoremen, and you get through the New Deal, and then a little later, kind of through Great Society programs, you get a very large burgeoning black middle class. And in neighborhoods like Compton, who historically were white only areas, even where I'm from, later become black areas, and then later become black areas that kind of get devastated due to deindustrialization. So as black people are getting into state government for the first time and local government finally getting into the workforce, at the same time, a lot of these opportunities are dwindling because jobs are leaving. And a lot of that isn't covered when we look at the history, no matter what you're going to look at. And I've watched about everything you can watch on the riots. I had Marcus watch probably the best documentary that I can think of that gives you a 10-year breakdown. And even that 10-year breakdown, again, to me, doesn't paint the entire picture because they glance over the Eula Love murder. Which
that was it was like burn motherfucker burn.
Burn motherfucker.
But it starts with the Watts riots as well, and then like kind of just goes on. So yeah, it kind of gives you a bit.
You have to understand the racial tensions that were happening then with this new group of young men that are so different from their parents, where their parents are like, this is different.
Yeah. And that's it's like, I think it might be interesting too, is like you see these like iterations of LAPD, specifically LAPD reforms, right? Where initially, like what, 40s, 50s, 60s, just blatantly just whooping the people's ass, like just doesn't fucking matter, right? That somewhat gets rolled back, but not, you know, like it's basically like these things that kind of get driving down, but it's like, and then you get to right now where even with all the body cams and all the promises of, you know, of transparency, right? That's like they always talk, oh, we're gonna be more transparent and all of these things. And none of this shit fucking happens. And does it happen less? You know,
Mhm.
yes, right? It's like less explicit. It's probably less prevalent, but it doesn't mean it just doesn't happen. And like the fact that it can happen is more of the like greater issue is that yeah, like I mean, what the like they get from Lamborghinis and they're still murdering people with, you know, and like there is really not a lot of fucking justice that comes of it. I mean, shit. The LA Sheriff's Department chief just like
The
he
current one?
announced,
Villanueva? Yeah.
yeah, announced he was investigating a reporter, one of the other people running for fucking sheriff, and then like later on he was like, "Nah, I was just joking."
You okay? You did your sound went out.
Oh shit, actually, I
Oh,
think
no, it didn't. There it is.
yeah, I think I hit the button on
Oh,
actual
okay, my bad.
fat sausage thing fingers. But yeah, you got this, you know, this guy who's like literally open call for some investigation into reporters literally showing videos of how someone who's like locked up was treated, and you know, like fucking dude like kneeling on his neck and all these things. It I don't know. I think that's where too it's like the where do we go from here in a way that can actually, you know, make some gains that, you know, and I guess too is it is seen in a real way, not as seen as some type of capitulation um and reforming, you know, but as a way of no, these are institutions that serve the community, right? Because then something that you, like we talk about on the show a lot is that like some type of organization that can help people from getting hurt, you know? And then like there are places that are dangerous as fuck. And those are like it's not that those communities can't ever heal. It's just it's gonna take time. Yeah. And there's gonna need to be some type of fucking help.
Well, let's remember two things, and this is I'm working on a very long piece that might be part of a book, or hopefully it'll just be a longer essay in sublation. We'll see what Doug and Jean say. Um, but in watching Mad Max, it kind of reminded me of how the police are the roving horde, because there's that great scene where Mel Gibson is like, I can't tell the difference, I'm paraphrasing, between me and the bad guys. And if you've watched the first Mad Max movie, the police are just as destructive in their quest to get the bad guy as the bad guy is in his quest to run away. So innocent people are constantly caught in the middle of two sets of roving hordes. There really is bad people in some of these areas. I am from an area where I dodged bullets a lot, got shot at. And that's a reality for a lot of people. And in the 90s, one thing we don't talk about enough is the drug market. We talk about crack as if it's magical, and we talk about gang problems as if they're magical, right? And our guest has finally shown up. Our guest was late. All of her minorityness caused her to be late.
Oh.
She came here on minority time. And I say minority time because each minority always says, oh, came here on colored time. And I married a Filipino woman, and her family be like, oh, you guys got here on Filipino time. I was like, oh, apparently all minorities are tardy. Moved to Mexico.
Yeah.
Later, like, you guys came here on Mexican time. I was like, oh.
Yeah.
So half of our guests got here late. So and I had a whole thing. If she would have been here on time, I could have read my introduction for her on time. I'm just giving her shit.
As you
Our
like
guest,
leaves it.
Francesca Fiorentini, began her journalistic work in 2004 with War Resisters League and Left Turn. From 2013 to 2019, Fiorentini was the host and senior producer of AJ Plus, the digital media outlet of Al Jazeera. She was the host of AJ Plus Newsbroke. Since 2016, Fiorentini has appeared on the progressive network, The Young Turks, as a guest and contributor. She was the co-host of The Damage Report with John Idarola. In 2019, Fiorentini hosted the special Red, White, and Who on MSNBC. Please welcome, coming all the way live from Southern California, the Francesca Fiorentini.
Wow. Hi, Jason. Hi, Marcus. I just came in and I heard like crack is magical, and I was like, I'm here for it. It's Saturday morning. Hell yeah. Like, tell me more. No, great to be here with you guys, and thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining. Originally, we were going to talk about something a little lighter, and then I was inspired to do this show. I don't know. I know Marcus was 6 when the riots happened, so he was knee deep in cartoons and eating cereal in his underwear.
I like to flip back and forth between Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and some of the
riot
news.
footage.
Yeah,
real fighting in the sewers. Yeah,
exactly. I was just I was watching the footage, like wondering, like waiting, right? Like Raphael's gonna, come out and put a stop to this at any moment, but never happened.
Well, before we get into some question asking, I made an intro, so let's watch that intro and get us ready for this conversation.
Ooh.
Oh, there it is. Bam.
We want to go to the streets now. We want to go on patrol with Sergeant John Bell of the Inglewood Police. Los Angeles is a gigantic sprawl. Inglewood is right on the edge of the area of the worst rioting. Sergeant Bell is tough, and he talks tough.
You're going from call to call, and you're always waiting for that real big thing to happen that's going to scare the shit out of you. What's going on? We got a shooting victim at the rear of probably one of the roughest areas in Inglewood. It's a real death trap in there, so you really got to be conscious, safety conscious of what the hell you're doing when you go in there. Stand by just a second. Watch those guys over there. What are you doing, dude? Okay. What happened, partner? I mean, were some dudes chasing you? Did you pull a robbery and get shot by somebody, or what?
Tell you the truth, sir, I just can't place it, man. I'm walking and I'm moving.
Just all got anything that can help us at all? How many dudes? What kinds of weapons? Did you hear automatic weapons? Did you hear anything? Or do you care?
Share now the rage of a black businessman up from the ghetto, dedicated to working in and for the inner city, dedicated to hiring inner city kids to work in his fried chicken stores. What is it like to see your dreams die before your eyes?
This store here was the first store that my parents built. I was in my mother's stomach at the time. That's how long we've been here. We had a little store on the corner, and we developed it into a little shopping center. Now, as you can see, it's not worth much.
Compton was the American dream. Sunny California, with a palm tree in the front yard, the camper, the boat. Temptingly close to the Los Angeles ghetto in the 50s and 60s, it became the black American dream. Open housing paved the way as middle-class blacks flooded into the city. Whites don't buy houses in Compton anymore. Now, with 74% of the population, black power is the fact of life, from banks to bowling alleys. But the dream that many blacks thought they were buying has turned sour. Though the mayor and 4 out of 5 city councilmen are black, they have been unable to solve the problems of crime and growing welfare, which is slowly turning suburban Compton into an extension of the black inner city.
That announcement set off a firestorm of uncontrolled riots and violence that is still going on tonight. Angry demonstrators went on a rampage, taking control of the streets, and it's been an ugly, terrible situation all night long. Fires, looting, gunshots, random beating attacks, and now the National Guard may be ready to move in.
Time to speak out. Rodney King appealed for peace.
I just want to say, you know, can we all get along? Can we get along? Can we stop making it horrible for the older people and the kids? And I mean, we've got enough smog here in Los Angeles. Let alone to deal with the setting these fires and things. It's just not right. It's not right, and it's not gonna change anything. We'll get our justice. They've won the battle, but they haven't won the war. We'll have our day in court, and that's all we want. And just I love, you know, I'm neutral. I love people of color. You know, I'm not like they picking me out to be. We've got to quit. We've got to quit. You know, after all, I mean, I can understand the first upset for the first 2 hours after the verdict, but to keep going on like this, and to see the security guard shot on the ground, it's just not right. It's just not right, because those people will never go home to their families again. And I mean, please, we can get along here. We all can get along. We just gotta, you know. I mean, we're all stuck here for a while. Let's try to work it out. Let's try to beat it. You know, let's try and work it out.
And they worked it out.
Well,
everything was worked out.
Well,
the end.
There are moments in every person's life where they witness a historical event, and that moment remains etched in their memory. We tend to recall these as before and after events. There was life before Rodney King, and there was life after Rodney King riots. As we look back at not just the events after the not guilty verdict, but the causes that led up to the eruption of South Central Los Angeles. When we remember April 29th, 1992, for most people, it's just the riots or maybe even the uprising. But unlike George Floyd, King's name is often detached. While his videotaped beating was the tipping point, he's forever immortalized by the phrase, "Can we all get along?" Forever captured in a moment of nervousness and fear, sadness, shock, and awe, and the unbelievably violent actions that were happening in his city in his name. King was emasculated not only by law enforcement in the brutally savage beating, but then again in the not guilty verdict. But the most ruthless emasculation is what he suffered in the court of public opinion in the Black community. King, who for the most part was silent during the trial, was waited on with bated breath by masses of people who for some reason projected onto King that he was to be the voice of revolutionary action. What they received was a shaky, beaten, frightened man. I will forever remember Rodney King in the 1992 riots and the O.J. Simpson verdict as the yin and yang injustice for Black America. Both men were victims of a racist police force. Both men galvanized the Black community. Both men silently were part of the growth of the 24-hour news cycle, a gold mine of around-the-clock coverage and pundit-filled rhetorical nonsense. Rodney King and O.J. Simpson will forever be linked in a vacuum of race, one man the epitome of justice denied, and for a time the other, he is sweet revenge, an avatar for justice deferred. Today we'll discuss the 1992 riots, what relevance it still has today, what changed, and where do we go from here. First and foremost, Francesca, where were you during the 1992 LA riots?
I was out there on the streets, man. I was setting fires. I kind of wish. No, I was 9. And so I do remember it fairly well. I'm from the Bay Area, so I was up there watching it on television. Yeah. And It I don't remember anyone other than Tom Brokaw putting like racist thoughts in my head. Like I didn't have folks who were like, you see, that's what happened. You know, there was, and it was very clear to me that some insane injustice had happened. I was like, damn. But like I grew up on I also watched Boys in the Hood. You know what I mean? Like that was like, I remember seeing Boys in the Hood when it came out, and that was like, I don't think you walk away from that film thinking like, wow, that community really is going. You're like, is completely empathetic, right? And you're just like, it must fucking suck to grow up in a redlined, ghettoized, low income neighborhood where drugs run rampant, and you are, whatever you are forced to. You're stuck between gangs and or living. You know what I mean? Many people are like around the world have been in those situations.
But you didn't grow up in the same part of the Bay Area as me.
Exactly. I did not. No. I did not. I grew up in a middle income suburb. So
you grew up next to Tom Brady.
Yeah, we're best friends.
I'm totally kidding.
His lemons fell on my side of the property.
You, Tom Brady, Barry Bonds' dad.
Yeah. Exactly.
From that
Joe
area?
Montana was around there.
Oh yeah, the Montanas.
I didn't live in Atherton, but hell no. But yeah. So anyway, but I remember it for sure, and I totally also, it was the yin and yang with the OJ trial as well.
Marcus, where were you in '92?
So like you said, I was just a young wee little lad. So but that seems like by OJ, that is something.
It's here for you. OJ is here.
That's
you weren't expecting the OJ turn on that, were you? When I was
I wasn't, which I think is a very, very good point that you make. Which I don't know if you stole that from somebody else. I'm just gonna attribute that you read that. In the book
that's
somewhere.
all.
No, nah, you did.
I was up till 5:30 in the morning doing that shit.
I was thinking of smart things. But no, I think that's a fantastic way to frame those frame that. But I think that and like Mike Tyson biting Evander Holyfield's ear. Those are like my two very early on like Black History moments. But no.
Where does In Living Color fit into any of that?
Oh, that's kind of the background to it all. Yeah. But no, I think but I think for me it's mostly just kind of like looking back on and like kind of as where we are now. Jesus. And
I saw that I had to post it. I saw that.
And that's the thing. It's like you like coming out too. It's like especially it's like that there was reverberations, obviously. And anytime there was like any like Black antagonisms, the chant of Rodney King, would start coming up. And I remember like that being a thing, like going like for years on, even I grew up in Ohio, so that's for me. It's always been like a kind of like something that like I didn't know what was going on, but even coming in, growing up, it was like always a thing that was like kind of a metronome for any type of Black antagonism issue that had come up.
I think one thing people forget when we think about uprisings, riots, whatever you want to call it, especially now we're using different verbiage, and when you get back in the Wayback Machine and go back to 1992, and even when we remembered Watts back then, it wasn't the Watts uprising we called it; it was called the Watts riots, and these were called for a long time until he spoke the Rodney King riots. And Rodney King spoke a little bit after the beating, when he came to in the hospital, if people remember. And then that was kind of it for him for a while. He got in a little bit of legal trouble before the trial with the police officers. And the reason why I put Rodney King and OJ as kind of this yin and yang for justice is one thing a lot of people don't understand with the Rodney King trial. The cops petitioned to move the trial.
Mm.
Now, let's keep one thing in mind about big trials in Los Angeles. They happen in Los Angeles. Richard Ramirez was found in Los Angeles, got thumped on by regular people in Los Angeles, and was tried in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
His defense lawyers didn't say maybe he's going to get an unfair trial here since, he's accused of killing all these people and you've been doing almost a year-long news story on this guy. We're probably going to have a bit of a tainted jury pool. Let's move this elsewhere. Didn't move. The Charles Manson trial. Maybe because this is the most terrifying thing we've seen happen in 60 years since the Black Dahlia, the jury pool is going to be a bit tainted. Didn't happen. But for some reason, these cops weren't going to get a fair trial in LA, so they were going to move the trial. And they had a few choices. One of the choices was, Francesca, I didn't know this until a few years ago, Alameda County.
Ooh.
The DA was like, well, Alameda has a very similar racial makeup. We have a courthouse there, and we all would have to live in Alameda County. Moving it to Simi Valley, quote unquote, Ventura County, enabled the judge to just drop in. The DA and his crew had to stay in Simi Valley for a time because they didn't live in that area. And most of the jury pool is either retired law enforcement, retired military, or like retired fire department.
Can I just break in and say, like, I had never been to Simi Valley, and then I went out there. I think that like for like poppy season or strawberry season or something like this, and we like stopped to go to the bathroom somewhere, and everyone in this parking lot was like a white dude in his 50s with Oakleys, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? I was like, what's going on? And everyone kind of like looked at me and Matt Shady, and Matt was like, oh yeah, Simi Valley is like where all cops go to retire and or live. Like that's what this is. And I was just like, Jesus Christ.
So think about having a trial there and think about the jury pool you're going to get in Simi Valley opposed to the jury pool you'd get in Alameda County with cities like Oakland and Hayward and San Leandro.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to think these were some of the mechanisms in this trial. O.J. Simpson doesn't have those same problems. He has a pretty black jury. He is the get right card for LA County.
That being said, Johnny Depp and Amber Heard, their trial is in Virginia, which is very interesting because that is where the Washington Post is. But if it was in LA, you'd have all these like fanboys and girls. You know what I'm saying? Like the jury's probably already like familiar with Johnny Depp. But
is that why the trial's in Virginia?
It's because that's where the Washington Post is, and that's where Amber Heard published her op-ed that called him essentially a wife beater. Yeah. Anywho, I just wanted to say one thing you said earlier I thought was really poignant, and then we can continue, but about the fact that like Rodney King was demonized for his words of like, can we all just get along? And I understand the sort of like the irony of that statement, given how heated and angry everyone was, and the situation was at that point, and how much this was a breaking point of like clearly Compton and a lot of other cities in LA and neighborhoods had been sick and fucking tired for so long of being occupied by the police. And so it's like, okay, it's kind of funny in that context, but it also reminds me, you compared him to George Floyd. George Floyd was murdered and he did not get to live to say whatever we would have wanted him to say, right? Which is very unfair to him and his voice to be able to be like, well, if he was alive, he would say X, Y, and Z. We don't know. He might have said something along the lines of, can't we all just get along? But I totally agree with you that we are also 2020. It's a very different moment than 91.
Yeah.
And it just shows you that in 30 years or 92, so much has not changed to the point that, you know, there's been no progress in terms of like reining in police, criminal justice reform, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to the point where a sentence like, can we all just get along, would even make sense. It'd be like, no, of course, this is not only we saw it in 92, and now we're just seeing the fact that we never dealt with what happened in 92. We never actually, you know, so anyway, so it's, but all to say, it is messed up to imagine what someone would say or judge them when they say something, the wrong thing, whereas the movement and the popular sentiment is going in different directions.
Well, I think like one of the questions is the portion of what happened in 1992 that was deemed like a natural reaction, right? And then people see, you know, the ongoing and you know, kind of like the extent of everything that had happened. And then Rodney King is just saying like, yeah, because he was essentially saying it's like you're making life really shitty for old people and kids, you know? And to even like respond to that with like, no, like old people and kids deserve to have a shitty life. You know, like I don't know, like it's a pretty fucking hard line to take. You know, I do understand that it's like you would really at the end of the day though, in this is something that Daruba Wahad said is that you know, like you can't take the victims of these horrible things and then assume that they're going to be the leaders, you know?
Yeah.
Like getting an ass whooping from the cops does not make you, you know, some type of revolutionary leader and like, you know, amongst the people. It could make you popular, but to expect that, you know, there's going to be any type of systemic change just because you were the one that got the most prominent ass whooping, you know, in decades. That's not, you know, you really can't make that connection, you know.
Well, there's also this moment of finally, and that's another reason why I kind of like to want to juxtapose King and Simpson. And when I juxtapose King and Simpson, I'm not saying that O.J. Simpson is an innocent man. I'm just using those two cases and that moment in time. And when you think about Rodney King, when it first was videotaped, another thing a lot of people don't realize, it was not front page news. It wasn't front page news until it hit the 24-hour news cycle. And one thing that is relatively new, it's been around for about 10 years at this time, is the idea of 24-hour news. And the reason why 24-hour news is really starting to blow up at this time is because deregulation is happening, where now corporate entities can own TV and radio stations. So you start to see a massive consolidation. So one thing that sells ad time better than music is talking. So as more stations are pivoting to syndicated talk show hosts, i.e. the rise of Rush Limbaugh happens in this era, now we want to constantly be informed all day long.
Yeah.
And with Rodney King, with this beating, everyone came out opposed to the police. The president at the time, George Bush Sr., was appalled at what he saw. Mayor Tom Bradley was appalled at what he saw. Police Chief Daryl Gates was appalled. Everyone demonized the officers, but not much was done. They finally get arrested, and then the trial happens, and the circus goes from there. But there were also other events that were happening in Los Angeles around the same time, and kind of throughout California around the same time, that really blow this up. And part of that, which I didn't see anybody mention, is, and I took out right when the young girl was murdered because I didn't want to see another snuff film. The fact that I found the actual raw camera footage was enough. Latasha Harlins, as we're waiting for the Rodney King trial, goes to a store, tries to buy some orange juice. The store owner says, "You're stealing it." She says, "No, I'm not." They literally get into a fist fight. She punches the store owner, socks are damn near out. Store owner pulls out a gun and shoots the little girl in the head over orange juice. And this is happening right before. Let's also keep in mind There was also a few years before a case where the LAPD raided the wrong house. And this is something they were doing a lot in the 80s. They raided the wrong house, destroyed it, literally pulled fixtures off the wall. Some of the raids that they did, they only left a retaining wall. And all this is going on at the same time. Also,
insane.
Also, we have this thing called crack. And let's put crack in the proper context for once. Cocaine, as the rapper said, is a popular drug, and it still is.
It's a hell of a drug.
And rocking cocaine up enabled people to afford the wonder drug and get high, right? And so when the street gangs got involved with the sell of cocaine, because now you have cocaine coming up through Mexico opposed to all of it coming from Florida, you're dealing with the more pure product. I know this might be a little bit much drug talk for people.
No, I watch Narcos Mexico.
Quit talking about my hood. But it's important to understand that once the drugs are coming up from Mexico, especially, you really get the blow up post NAFTA.
Mm-hmm.
Cartel change happens. But even pre-NAFTA, as drugs are coming up from Mexico, now you're getting more cocaine. The street gangs now have more power.
Mm-hmm.
And you're talking about more money. So if you can step on a kilo of cocaine and make a few grand, but a kilo of cocaine makes you tens of thousands of dollars with crack, it is an all-night business. Way different from selling 8 balls in the club. The money these guys were making are astronomical. You might kill somebody.
Yeah.
With your drug turf. So now you have a all-out drug war over dope spots. So you have literal roving hordes of people trying to protect drug turf because there's so much money coming in from drugs. Also, we have eliminated, for the most part, the middle class through deindustrialization. All those plants that were there, all those union jobs that were there, they're gone. You just have a handful of jobs where you can actually have a good middle class living.
It's also just so funny to hear like Brokaw's description of the history of Compton, like it wasn't a deliberate redlining, like, you know, segregation, you know, like racism in real estate, like move essentially to be like, yeah, black people are here. Anyway, oh, they can't solve crime on their own? Wow, that's crazy how they're like doing it to themselves. I mean, obviously there's cops everywhere, but anyway, this is crazy, you know. Oh, there's no jobs because, like, you know, everyone pulls their money out of that area, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I just thought that was really interesting where it's like, well, it's
Bill Curtis, by the way. That was Bill.
Oh, sorry. Curtis. Yeah, Brokaw would never do that. Bless him. Bill Curtis. It's just
Bill Curtis.
Yeah, yes. The violent Angelino. No, I think that's it. It reminds me of the ways that we like talk about also like Middle Eastern countries as like, what's wrong with them? You know, like they're there, they've got control of their own country, but they can't get along. And like, it's the way it was described to me by like a professor of mine was like kind of the, like essentially looking at a situation as if like there's something, fundamentally inherently wrong with like Muslims, Arabs, etc. Same thing with black communities. Like, well, you know, they've got all this, they've got housing. I mean, what do you know what I mean? They have neighborhoods, blah, 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 as if everything was great. I do want to just say that the killing of Latasha Harlins, I did not know about. And it is interesting that it was a Korean American woman who did kill her. And I also think that like you compare that to, I think, some of the anti-Asian violence that's happening now and the ways that a lot of Asian led and in LA, like Asian, Chinese, and Korean led specifically organizations are like very much not trying to double down on a pro-cop stance in the face of, you know, violence against Asian Americans. And of course, white supremacists or just, you know, white people online, if one of the perpetrators was a black person, doesn't matter if 9 of them are white, one person was black, they're like, well, you see, because black people hate Asians. And you're like, all right, great, awesome,
Well,
cool.
and I think that like this situation though is like probably like a very, or at least a reason why, you know, there's kind of like widespread sentiment of like this antagonism between, you know, Asian people and especially like Koreans, and you know, because like literally you have this situation where it's very, you know, like black people are kept out of getting, you know, small business loans and everything like that. The jobs that they were having, that they were securing, you know, their housing and everything for, have disappeared. And yeah, like that's, you know, some of those like actually interesting, like the documentary, they're saying like no one's gonna give you a like intro to the community when you're starting up, you know, a small business, right? It's like no one's gonna, you know, say like, hey, you know, welcome to Compton. There's been some
Here's your welcome
racial,
packet.
racial tensions for quite some time. You know, and like that's it, and that is you know, a part of the whole thing. I think what's interesting as well is that the fact that really at the beginning of the riots, it's not like at that point the police chief is just saying like, well, I'm just not going to show up at all. And you know,
Right.
You know
really,
why he didn't show up?
well, because people were upset even at all, and they critiqued him, right? And then he was like, no, I'm like, you know,
Nope.
I'm not gonna get any cops. No, what's up?
Nope. Son overdosed.
Oh
Ah.
shit.
Son had a drug problem. Yeah.
And so he
Dang.
was just like, let it burn.
It's a little more complex than that, right? You know, there was situations that people didn't get handled, quote unquote, and there was no plan. LA had no plan because remember the trials going on way in Ventura County. For those that don't know, Ventura County is where Malibu is. It's close to LA, but it's not LA. So
I mean, it would take hours, right? Probably to like get there and you're like,
In traffic, but yeah, I mean it's like 6 miles away, but it takes you like 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's LA traffic, which is a whole different beast. But another thing that I want to put in context to Latasha Harlan's murder is before she's killed, I believe 5 Korean store owners were killed that year.
Damn.
So again, we have to put everything into its proper context. Even talking about redlining and Compton as a black neighborhood, we have to put everything into its proper context. And first and foremost, black people were paying more for houses. So when Bill Curtis talks about the fact that black people were defaulting on loans, we still don't even have the 30-year mortgage yet. 30-year mortgage is instituted in 1971. That story came out in 71. So there's no way you're going to default that quickly on a 30-year note. So you don't have the 30-year note. And what he's talking about isn't home buyers entering the market with aid. He's talking about home renters. What we often don't talk about when we speak about gentrification is we look at gentrification as a racialized problem of white people moving into a neighborhood that might have been predominantly minority and then taking over culture, right? Or co-opting culture. They want it for the culture because it's cool, and then they back out. And while that is true on a surface reason, as I saw that happening in Oakland, definitely see it in San Francisco. We have to remember that cities need a certain tax base. So if the majority of people that live in your city are renting and they're renting on like Section 8, that means they're not part of the tax base. So as a municipality, don't you want people coming into your community that are going to bring business and that are going to pay taxes? So you generally want homeowners, and then you want to bring in business. And those two things are hard to do when you have a base that's filled with renters and renters that are on some sort of government assistance.
Yeah, the song remains the same today. It's just incredible how renters, nobody gives a shit about renters. Your local representative I mean, they'll pretend to care, but it's like, oh, you rent? Sorry. I mean, it's one reason you can't, in terms of the homelessness crisis in California, like we can't actually fix that because people who are homeowners become shitty motherfuckers who are like, no, I don't want my housing, the value of my home to go down because there is a shelter nearby. Okay, well, that's why we're not building shelter. You know, that kind of bullshit.
No, that is definitely why we don't want to build shelters, because again, I think the problem here, and as we talk about, and I asked this question in the original blurb, when we think about reforming law enforcement, and here we are some 30 years after the riots, and what we got was cameras. We all said this, we need transparency, we need accountability, put cameras on them and then we'll know. Well, we had cameras that videotape Rodney King get the shit kicked out of him, and the narrative that still exists to this day is that he was on PCP. I'm going to give you guys 2 facts real quick. I want you guys to remember these facts because you will hear this for the rest of your lives, especially if we stay in this industry and you talk about law enforcement. A, PCP does not make you stronger. Does it numb certain sensors in your body to pain? Yes. Does it make you think you can do things you can't? Maybe. But it doesn't make you physically stronger.
There's a lot of drugs.
One reason why LAPD was killing people left and right in the early 80s and 70s was the carotid chokehold. They banned the carotid chokehold, and Marcus, what was it replaced with? Lead pipes.
Lead pipes. Oh, wow. Jeez.
Strategically taught to use the lead pipes to hit people in places that will break bones and get them to comply. So when we watch
this is like a wrestling video game. What the fuck?
Yeah, this is. I want people to understand
like
this.
A lead pipe.
The George Floyd Police Act has a part in the bill that says we're going to ban the chokehold.
Mm-hmm.
George Floyd wasn't killed by a chokehold. He was killed by a knee to the neck. There's been several people that Eric Gardner, I think, was killed by a chokehold. But banning the chokehold has not stopped a bullet. Police cameras have not stopped a bullet. So Rodney King never had PCP in his system, and PCP does not make you stronger. But it's still the justification. And even in the trial, even after it came out in the trial that Rodney King had no PCP in his system, the officers that got off still said that the reason why they beat him to a bloody pulp was because they feared for their life because he was on and under the influence of PCP.
Insane.
Reforming law enforcement. That's why I asked the question, is it a bourgeois project? Because we cannot reform law enforcement until you improve material conditions. As long as we look at property, more importantly than we look at people, and this is more idealistic, and this can't change overnight. But one thing we're talking about here is home ownership. If I'm a homeowner and motherfuckers are breaking into my shit, cops might come. They might. Boys in the Hood. Isn't that one of the early scenes in Boys in the Hood? Guy breaks into Larry Fishburne's house.
Yeah. But the problem, obviously, is white home ownership, right? And like, you know, and that's when cops actually come out to defend homeowners. And right. And obviously, I think that some folks in the chat are talking about, like, you know, cops sicking like rioters or people who were, you know, in the streets, angry, the uprising on like Korean business owners. Like that was like a strategic thing. And that makes all the sense. Also, it's like the cops aren't necessarily out there defending. I mean, it's funny because I can't imagine. I mean, maybe there was, but I can't imagine like Laura Ingraham defending like a Korean immigrant's shop with the same vigor that she and other right wingers are defending a fucking Target, you know, from getting, or like a Walgreens from being smashed in this latest round, right, in 2020. So yeah, I mean, I think that I hear you on the homeownership and I totally agree, but I'm like, so long as you have, I think, segregated communities, and you have the inability for Black home ownership to expand and to be accessible, or in other neighborhoods, unless you have a deliberate effort to do that and to diversify and to change neighborhoods that are so predominantly white. It's still a form of segregation and ghettoization that you can be like, no, that's, I don't know, like it's I don't know the answer. Clearly, I'm not as versed on this.
I'll give you a great example.
Yeah.
Where we're from, the Bay Area,
Mm.
San Francisco, is one of the few places in America that I can think of where a $5,000 a month one bedroom is next door to a halfway house.
In some areas, yeah. Where you
Downtown.
used to live, in the Tenderloin, yeah.
Yeah, downtown in the TL. That's what the TL looks like, right? Your neighbor is going to come out. Maybe they're breeding rats in their room.
Someone's got to do it.
That happened a few years ago in SF. Lady was breeding rats in one of the low-income housing, but that's one of those areas where those things happen. And one thing I will say I was just in San Francisco a few weeks ago with my 3-year-old. And I'm not saying crime doesn't exist. Smash and grabs definitely exist, as it was in the news so much recently. But I've never felt frightened in SF. I've been scared in Oakland. I've been scared in New Orleans. Definitely scared the shit out of me in Detroit. Where Marcus is from can be frightening. In the Rust Belt in Ohio. But everywhere I've ever been frightened to be has been somewhere where it's extremely deindustrialized and there just isn't anything there. And I'm looked at as a come up. And if you're looking at me as a come up, I should probably get out of the area, because you probably was practicing. And again, what we're seeing is the criminalization of poverty overall is what we see. Right. And we are from, all three of us on the screen are from major metropolitan areas. So we're always going to be from areas that are a bit of a cultural and racial melting pot. When you go to Boise, Idaho, which I've spent maybe too much time in as a Black man, there isn't the same racial makeup. It's just white people. And Butte, Montana, maybe you see some natives, but going to the South and working there was the first time I saw white people hate white people. I'd never seen that before. Living in the Bay Area, the San Francisco, the Bay, LA is where racial ethnicity goes to die if you're white. If you're a white ethnic, you come to the Bay Area just to be white. You could be white, to be Italian, and talk with a funny accent. The shit that Pascal hates, he talks about all the time. Pascal sometimes would be like, Jason, white people in California are just white, huh? I'm like, yes, they're just white here.
But we got all kinds of Asians, though. We make up for it with, like, all the Asians. So
if you're from a war-torn Asian country and you escaped a genocide,
yeah, we got you. We got you. And that is funny. Yeah, moving to the East Coast, I was like, wow, everyone's really invested in their like particular brand of whiteness. I guess that's cool. I guess that's different, but it was like, Italian. like, all right. Anyway,
right? No, you got to see it firsthand, coming from the Bay Area and being where you're from, where there's a ton of white people. Then going to New York, you're like, what do you mean you're Italian?
I think
white.
I mean, aside from the Bay Area being the white melting pot in and of itself, I think part of the issue with these are systemic, and like even I think like, oh, any talks of like, oh, what do we do? Where do we go from here? It's like understanding that if we start doing all the right things today, this is like decades-long process. But like home ownership or just housing, land reform, these are all things that are looked at in one singular way. They're exercised in in one way, and most people are just left out. At this point, it's something like a little around a quarter of Americans pay over 50%.
Yeah.
of their income for rent, like over half of your income on rent.
Oh yeah.
Like that's fucking crazy. And so that's the type of shit that's just not sustainable. And it's going to, and they like we talked, like this is going to allude to, people doing things that are, deemed as crime, but just makes sense. When people are squatting, like utilizing housing that's not being used, i.e., living in a fucking house, and these are all things that like, people talk about quite a bit of the amount of like, available housing stock that we do have versus the amount of homeless people. You get in some fucking wonky issues because some numbers are just based off of like what's available because like some people are actually like moving, but either way, like the answer is still the same: is we have the capabilities to house everyone, right? That's not
Yeah.
that's not a
But
problem.
we won't treat housing like we treat wars on drugs and how we treat wars on terror.
Yeah.
And when the Olympics was coming to LA in '84, this is when LA Police Department starts to get militarized weapons, right? And also, this is a moment for Mayor Tom Bradley, the black mayor, to turn downtown LA into a thriving business sector. He had visions of LA being the tech center of California, not Silicon Valley. That's still kind of hasn't happened to this day. But when we think about housing and when we think about the unhoused, often we look at it as housing is the singular answer, and you put people in a house and they're happy. And every time I hear that, I always think, oh, these people have never worked with the unhoused because A, it's a complex issue, and B, you don't understand people that have been probably institutionalized. A lot of people since birth. You're talking foster care.
I feel this is the thing though. It's like institutionalized people have always been like de-institutionalized because the institutions suck so fucking bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is like something that we talk about often, right? Is like how hard it is to get someone who's chronically homeless to even talk to you. If you are someone, like representing an organization that's trying to like reach out and just, get some help. Just even saying, hey, will you have a conversation with me about this opportunity? They'll talk to you, right? If you just say, what's up, what's going on, they'll have a conversation with you. When you say, hey, I'm from this organization and we're trying to help you out, blah, 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 they're gonna tell you, get the fuck out of here. Don't waste my time. Don't waste my time again.
I think what's really hard about this conversation also in terms of when it comes to the police, the way that I feel like we all need to remember and think about this is that, especially right now where the crisis in a lot of these cities is homelessness, that the police are there to basically enforce and clean up from the failures of democratic administrations, democratic governors and mayors and city council, corrupt ass city council who have a lot of money from the real estate industry and often on a statewide level in California, a lot of money from fossil fuel industries, all of that shit. And cops are there, whether here or Eric Adams in New York, to be like, we will plug up the holes in your fucked up policy that perpetuates inequality and hangs people out to dry and blames them for their own homelessness. Some asshole wrote a book called San Francisco, and every time someone wants to talk about homelessness, they use anecdotal bullshit. One time I was here and this guy looked at me weird. One time I saw someone shooting up. One time I asked someone if they wanted a sandwich and they looked at me like I had 3 heads and I'm never going to help someone again. Shut the fuck up. I'm sorry. Shut up. You have no idea what you're talking about. Please stop using anecdotal evidence or lack thereof when you talk about the unhoused, please. But so more specifically, we've resulted to criminalizing homelessness, criminalizing, public urination, sleeping on the sidewalk, all those kinds of things. And when you actually look at what has happened in San Francisco, for example, 70% of the homeless in SF used to be housed. Now that might seem insane to some people because you're like, oh yeah, But for some, it is a news flash that people aren't always born without homes. All right?
What?
Not always. Just like people aren't always born addicts. They're not always born without homes. But again, like usually most people are born indoors. All right? I'm just going to put that out there. Most people been born indoors. So I just think that like we really have to, and it's on like honestly liberals with money and some amount of like, I mean, and homeowners, and it's on like I think leftists and progressives to get those elitists to actually really understand that slogans like defund the police, that's a negotiation, man. That's not abolish. Because you're looking at 91, you look at 92, and then you draw the through line. You look at the way the prison industrial complex has expanded, the way the war on drugs has not abated, the way that war abroad has only come back to communities of color and further militarized the police. And you're like, yeah, defund is a fucking compromise. And when you say defund, we inherently mean, in my opinion, what Marcus is saying, which is those institutions that have been so hollowed out, like foster care, like mental health facilities, we refund those areas. And that is a 3-pronged or a 4-pronged, along with housing, which necessitates reining in the fucking real estate industry, because you can't rein in the fossil fuel industry if you're giving them like $300 billion a year, right? We can't subsidize the shit we're trying to rein in. Anyway, but yes, it is.
That's the thing that like it, there's just things that don't make any sense, and it's like I don't know. There's just 60 Minutes had this interview with this real estate asshole, and he's talking about how millennials just don't want to own homes. Millennials don't want responsibility of home ownership. It's just they want to be able to jump around and move around. And these things are just absolutely ridiculous. And this is something that under capitalism, people don't have really like the framework to deal with housing, food insecurity, the prison industrial complex, the military industrial complex. We don't really have the mechanisms to deal with these issues, because those are the things that hold this whole thing together.
There's no incentive. There's no money in it. So no one's going to fucking invest in it.
The incentive is actually the opposite, right? The incentive is the opposite. Is that while, like that's the military industry, prison industry are like the things that are like, yes, that make money onto themselves, but they're also the mechanisms that hold the structure together. And so that's where, how do we get out of this?
Well, it's very hard because when we talk about hollowed out institutions, it's not just hollowed out institutions, it's the privatization of institutions. So we have to always keep in mind whenever we speak about things like foster care and even like veteran services, some of these are being sent to the private sector to run the administrative end of it. So for foster care, for example, there's actually a really great book about it, and I will find the title for you guys. Basically, what we're starting to see now is the most vulnerable of us, and this can only happen under capitalism. The most vulnerable of us still sometimes get some benefits. There's still some money people get. And in foster care, a lot of times people don't know that a family member may have died and they get a benefit. And because a lot of these systems are now being privatized, these private companies are now literally stealing that benefit. Literally. And it is all nice and legal. And one thing that I have a problem with, and as we're talking about the liberal lens, there's nothing more cruel than the liberal lens. And when we talk about things like corruption, that is the most bourgeois thing to talk about, is corruption, because politics today, and even more so in the neoliberal era that we live in, is always a public entity aligned with the private business. That is ultimately what corruption always is, right? So, but that's also the way government works.
That's the system. That's the system.
I mean,
there's a public-private partnership, right?
It's funny. Sorry. I totally agree with you, but I'm also like, I feel like the Trumpian form of corruption, i.e., giving your like sons and daughters direct like positions in government, that happens a lot on a city council wide level around this country, and it happens a lot in areas that we don't. So, like the neoliberal level of corruption, which I think is the one you're talking about, absolutely exists, and that's like a consensus. That's a status quo. And then, like outside of that, I feel like there's a little bit of a demarcation in my mind in terms of a Trumpian corruption, which is also neoliberal, which we always forget, like as if Trump wasn't a total neoliberal. He fucking was.
The neoliberal movement starts with well, some say it starts with Carter, but it really ramps up during Reagan. And I think we always have to remember neoliberal starts with Republican Party, and it's a bipartisan project.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is when I'm speaking about corruption, and when you're talking about, you know, granting positions to family members, let's remember, and I'm not saying this is any sort of like slight, I'm just saying let's remember that you live in LA now. The Garcetti family is a political family. The Bay Area, Rob Bonta, who just got promoted to Attorney General, his wife took his position as a state assembly member. And this goes on and on and on and on. And like you said, in city councils throughout. And
Hunter Biden's laptop. No, I'm sorry.
LA has probably, I believe it is the most powerful city council in the country. So when we talk about how do we, first and foremost, we have to stop kind of looking at corruption in that way. I want to bring in, I got to bring you in, Gene. You got to stop acting like you're the man.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Hi, who's that?
This is Jean Bajlan. This is Dr. Jean Bajlan.
And this is baby Viana, and she's just had her dinner, and she's we just came in to watch your guys' show. So I snuck in the back entrance of the nightclub, which is of course the This is Revolution access port, which I have access to. She started watching from the front line. I always like to come and sneak in and watch Jason, but sometimes it's a high risk maneuver because then he'll put me on the screen, you know, when I'm picking my nose or
you got Breona there. She's so cute.
She's very small and she likes watching everybody. So say hi, Viana.
Jean, while you're here, can you speak about the cruelty of liberals real quick?
The cruelty of liberals?
Mm-hmm.
You know, do we have time?
You got 5 minutes.
We got 5 minutes.
Like, I mean, you've written chapter on this.
I mean, my position is you guys are talking about political corruption. So there's a number of different positions on this, in my opinion. So there are some people on the left who get so burnt out by the blatant hypocrisy of liberals that they end up becoming functional conservatives.
Sure.
And although I vigorously disagree with that position, I can't help but sympathize with it to a certain degree. Usually these people are kind of horrible people. They just go totally nuts. But on the flip side, you can understand it because we live in a society where liberalism, cultural liberalism, and neoliberal economics are largely the dominant force in society. Now, of course, conservatives, in America specifically, using the federal system, are able to carve out their own reactionary territories. But even there, it is difficult for them because even in conservative states, you have, you know, influential liberals who they will often, you know, they would probably vote Democrat if they were in a blue or a purple state. But if they're in a place like I am in Missouri, they would, you know, they end up rallying behind the Chamber of Commerce Republicans. Because, of course, what people don't realize is when you go to red state America, you really have two Republican parties. You have the Chamber of Commerce and you have the like really right-wing Christian fundamentalists. You know, people talk a lot about the white nationalism and the racism, but I think that kind of misses the point a little bit that, you know, these conservative movements have kind of toned down the racism. They still have racists in the thing, but they're really playing a lot more on the masculinity issue. They have adopted some of the language of social and racial liberation and appropriated it for their own reactionary causes. So you end up with them having people like Candace Owens and people like, and we were talking about this on the show the other night, Jason. You know, if you're an epistemology person who says, well, we always have to listen to, you know, Black people and their voices first. It's like, well, why aren't you going to listen to Candace Owens? She's looks like a very Black person to me. So so you know, if we're going to play that game, conservatives can easily play that game. They can always find some particular member of a group to put them forward and say, and then your mother-in-law at dinner is like, well, have you seen this Black person who's saying all these things that I agree with? Did you know that?
Sure. Yeah. The essentialism is dangerous for sure.
So I think liberals, liberalism is dangerous in the sense that it is the kind of, I like to call it HR liberalism, where it's just all about like feelings and changing people's behavior, and nothing can ever be resolved, rather than dealing with concrete material issues in order to help people, you know, poor and working class people who are, as Pascal always says, disproportionately from minority groups, right? By untethering the discourse of social liberation, whether that's a discourse to do with gender, whether it's to do with sexual orientation, whether it's to do with your racial or ethnic background, untethering those from a materialist critique of politics has made those groups has kind of created a vulnerability where the right wing is able to paint these very important issues, which cannot be reduced to pure class interest, as being a kind of liberal fantasy and a sort of a liberal obsession with identity politics. When in fact, like, these are like core issues of freedom, which should be protected by the left. But liberals, you know, you end up with a whole group of people who are like, look, it's not, I'm fine with Black people, I'm fine with like gay people, I just don't like poor people in my neighborhood. You know, they have all these signs on their yards which says, this house believes that blah 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 blah. But are they going to send that kid to the local public school, or are they going to put him in a private school? So we end up with this kind of like contradiction in liberalism, where there's this like lip service to, you know, like giving a shit about like different identity groups and different sort of you know, social movements, when in practice all they're really doing is reshuffling the deck chairs on the Titanic as it sinks. And so we can have like more people of color, we can have more women drone operators, we can have more trans, you know, CIA torturers, and they're trying to sell that to us as progress. And I don't think that's I think that's the danger of liberalism.
I hear what you're saying. I just want to jump in with a little different take on that. I think that where you get the shitty lefty / crypto neocons who've, you know, essentially just become right wingers who go on Tucker Carlson, where you get the Glenn Greenwalds, I think is when we conflate neoliberalism and liberalism as an idea. I think that's sort of where you have the Orban-esque Hungary model, because Orban, who again is the far right's god at this point, and Hungary is the gold standard of what they want America to turn into, hates liberalism, does not believe that there should be representative democracy, does not believe in inclusion, believes that every kind of overture or inclusive attempt to make sure minorities, to make sure people of color, women, LGBTQ plus people are included, that's all BS. And I think that the right has that. And I think that the left's danger, and I usually hear this from white guys, is that they hate neoliberalism so much and they hate the Democratic Party so much. And because they are not themselves necessarily from a lot of those communities, they easily are like, oh, this is identity politics and it's all BS. And I have to kind of push back on that, because we're in a moment right now where women's rights, trans rights, people of color, Black Americans, like, this is a systemic trampling. And at the same time, you've got an incredible upsurge of a multiracial union effort, a class consciousness budding. And so I think we can hold those two things at the same time and mount a defense and an offense with that in mind, without throwing away the good part of liberalism, which for me is a multiracial democracy. And like that, ultimately, if we've never had it in this country, I agree we've never had it, but like I still want to fight for that. And I think the slippery slope is when we're like, all inclusion and representation is a neoliberal bullshit project by the Democrats. I don't buy that. I think inclusion and representation actually matters.
Oh, I would,
but
I
I
would,
think
I
it's
would whole, I
I
would
think it's one piece of the broader thing. So anyway, I'm not saying that's what you're saying.
I would
I would say
wholeheartedly disagree with that. That the Democrats, and look, I don't know how many of us, because most of, except for Jean Bajlan, have been in a diversity training.
I have been in diversity training.
There's
It's
nothing that reminds you of the bullshit of that project like a diversity training. Once you eliminate any sort of class critique from your argument, then it really does become, and I disagree. I think it does become simply we need more trans women drone operators. And I think that's what always happens because we get more concerned about the identity. We've had shows on here where we talk about things like the enslavement of Native Americans. I said this the other night. And what was the critique? You didn't have any Native Americans talking about it. How many white people have lied and said they were Native Americans and literally written books? What does it matter?
I mean, I think standpoint epistemology, in a moderate sense, is just logical. If you're having a conference, for example, like I work in academia, if you're having a conference on, let's just say, women's history with 50 people and there's no women, it's a bit weird. There's a problem there, right? There's definitely a problem. But like I said, if you take it to an extreme, sense, then everybody is defined by everything is defined by who's saying it. And I think there's always a tension in this, but I think there's a truth that perspective matters and experience matters. There's no denying about that. But at the same time, just because people have had a particular experience doesn't mean they know all the answers to a particular problem or they're necessarily more wise. How many, for example, poor people who became rich are have the perspective that if I can get rich, the only problem with poor people is that they're lazy, and I know because I was brought up poor and things like that. So I'm not.
What I'm saying is identity politics without justice. Like you can't have all these things without justice are toothless. And I do, and I'm sorry if this hurts some people in the chat, but like you actually look at makeups of governments, right? Like governments that governs nations. And when there is more gender representation, where there are more women, and yeah, throw Thatcher at me, please. Oh God, throw Albright at me. Who else you got? Oh, that's it. Yeah, thought so.
Hold in my ear.
When there are more, cool. I can raise you 1 million. When there are more women in government, actually, and this is statistically proven, there is more diplomacy, more agreement, and more things get done. You can call that insane identity politics, but like it is. I'm sorry, it's true. It exists. When Rwanda was remaking their entire government after the genocide, they made sure to have women be 50% of that government as a rebuilding, as a moving forward. And now, of course, you need a justice piece. And I know we hate the way that the CIA is trying to recruit women and trans people. And we know we hate that, but we cannot knee jerk to the level of saying all that is bullshit. All of it is window dressing. We have to reclaim, in my opinion, the radical Black feminist roots of something like identity politics if we are to move forward with class consciousness, with race consciousness, and anti-racist, multiracial future. That's my hope.
You can't have it is like if you don't factor in the historical experience of communities like obviously you have class divisions, but society also has other cleavages related to gender, sexual identity, ethnicity, and so on and so forth. If you don't factor those things into your worldview, you are basically going to become a conservative, because you're going to reject any acknowledgement of the differing historical experience of different groups in the conflict. But at the same time, statistics can be very misleading, in the sense of, when we've talked about this on the show before, for example, with racial statistics. When you look at, for example, the Black community as a whole, you get a particular set of statistics that obviously highlights the disparity. But that, in a certain extent, obfuscates the differences that exist between the Black community, between an elite within that community that is positioning itself to gain the majority of the benefits of, let's say, liberals' openness to like dealing with the historical grievances of the Black community in America, who are going to orientate policy to things that are going to be like helping Black businesses, helping Black homeowners. That's great, but that's not helping the vast majority of Black people who are poor and working class. That's what I'm saying when we have to always factor in, like class and ideological orientation. You gave the example of women in government, and I would, in a very moderate say, I would say, in a general sense, it's probably better to have a more representative government that looks like the population over which is governing. But I would argue that maybe when we look at those statistics, we don't just look at gender in an absolute sense, but what is the political orientation of these governments in which women are playing a role? Because you mentioned, like, you can have a Golda Meir, you can have a Margaret Thatcher, you can have a Theresa May, and Thatcher in particular was not very helpful to the cause of women's
Destroyed
emancipation.
Northern England, right?
But it's just it's such a bizarre, like, I believe we can buy into and believe in inclusion and representation without essentialism. I'm biracial. I'm half Chinese and Italian. I've never known where to go when the group splits up into the POC and the, white people folks. Like, I think essentialism is really poisonous. And because it often is essentialism, like, hey, Black person, speak on the behalf of all Black people. Hey, Muslims.
Exactly.
I think obviously that is bullshit. But so it is also bullshit to point to, like, well, these women empower women. Obviously, just like all people, we still operate under white supremacist capitalist patriarchy that is still existing. These governments are not shining, brilliant, amazing examples. They
Is that really why? But is that why those women act that way, or is they just acting in
I think for sure that is why a lot of them do act that way. But I'm not here to excuse the, like, the warmongering ladies. Like, I'm not here to, like, Yaz Queen Hillary Clinton. I'm just not.
We do like a good Yas Queen.
Yeah. No, nobody fucking is trying to do that shit at all. And all that shit it's played out. It's bullshit. And I even think libs know that some of that is bullshit, especially as, like, Bernie Sanders is accused of sexism against, Elizabeth Warren, yada, yada, yada. But obviously what we're talking about, and what I think is the Democrats' failure around policing, right? And around this very issue. And I think that I've been really disappointed in the way that some on the left have seen this 2020 uprising, seen how it's led by not just young Black people, but multiracial outpouring, like, just massive. And yes, the whitewashing, the woke washing, if you will. Yes, the Amazon featuring Black stories and all that other corporate bullshit that exists. That's gonna happen. But that happens because there's a movement going on. And then you have, I feel like, folks still shitting on these slogans like defund the police. And you're like, how do we get here? How are we still trying to purely make this about class? And we've done that's like a Biden administration tack. You know what I'm saying?
Biden administration will never talk about class consciousness, because that's not a once you say class consciousness, someone's going to call you a Marxist, and that's a bad word.
Sure.
I would say this: Preston Smith, the great Preston Smith II, was on the show almost 2 years ago talking about the failures. He wrote a whole book about redlining in Chicago. And Lorraine Hansberry, who wrote Raisin in the Sun, was a communist. Her father is known as the Kitchenette King of Chicago. He bought a bunch of houses, blew out the kitchen, and sold just the kitchenettes. A market is always created. And these are the things that we don't talk about because it interferes with the identity dynamic of the discussion. So if you've only read The Color of Law, then you don't really understand redlining because you're only understanding it from a racial dynamic from a person that's writing a very libertarian book. And I'm saying this as someone that's had him on my show. And when Preston Smith talks about racial democracy, that is the failure of the war on poverty. Is racial democracy over social democracy. That was the failure, I repeat, the failure of the Great Society programs, which lifted, as Jean was trying to talk about, tons of Black people into a burgeoning middle class, which also thrust tons of Black people into government. But what happened to those cities? If we pull back and just look at it from a bird's eye view instantly, we'll say all that project failed, much like Bill Curtis's story of LA. Well, it looks like this project failed. If you want to see a multiracial city council, a multiracial government, look no further than Los Angeles. Historically, you've had Japanese, and I always want to include Japanese because we forget as Californians, they were interned on the West Coast, not the East. So you're talking about literally interned people now getting into government, Latin people. Totally had their housing to Chavez Ravine. If you know the story of Chavez Ravine, initially it was kind of a makeshift area where Mexican people built their own homes and even had to dig trenches for sanitation. And the city came in the 20s and said, we're going to build housing here. We're going to build housing here for you guys. We're going to build schools. We're going to build parks. The LA Times and real estate lobbies pushed back on it because it was too communist. It didn't fit in with the capitalist paradigm of home ownership.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
People are now in.
I love that. I mean, that's awful, but that's a great example. It's a great fucking example.
I mean, the people that get put into levers of power.
And I think what I would say to this is, obviously, because women, Black people, other minority groups in the United States get the butt end of the capitalist system, right? I would say, on average, it can lead to them playing a disproportionate role in radical politics. My area of specialization in the Middle East. If we look at a country like Turkey, if we look places like Syria, if we look places like Iran, minority groups in those countries, religious minorities, have often played a disproportionate role in radical politics, not because there's something inherently, special about Alevis or, different Armenians or things like groups like that, but because those groups were less under the illusion that the system was serving them. And I think, that's an important thing to understand. So the example you give, like, for example, you might look to a country like Sweden, towards Finland and say, Finland has way more women in government and it's a better government. But partly that could be part of the reason could not just be that they're inherently because they're women, but because they are women, they've had a particular experience, and they have a particular ideological perspective that has driven them to take on a particular set of politics. My reticence about inverted commas identity politics is not about identity politics per se, in that, as someone of Kurdish origins, Kurds are pretty oppressed across the Middle East to certain degrees. But I'm aware of the way that historically Kurdish nationalist discourse has been used for particularly reactionary purposes within the context of Iraq. I'll give you a concrete example.
Being pro-war.
Well, not more than just being pro-war. I would say this. In Iraq, up until the 90s, Kurds fought this like big, war of liberation against the Iraqi government. Then in 91, there was an uprising. US and UN stepped in. There was a Kurdish sort of safe haven, created a de facto state that still exists today, right? What drove the creation of that state was a genuine oppression of Kurdish people in Iraq. But since about 1991, Kurds have been, most Kurds in Iraq have been living in the Kurdish region under their own government. And in that context, Kurdish nationalism has become an ideology that is used to keep people in line and keep them from critiquing their own political leadership, because they say, hey, if it's not for us, the Arabs are going to come and get you. Maybe the Arabs are going to come and get you, but these guys are swindling you too. Now, when you look at the political classes that exist in the United States, you mentioned Black Lives Matter, Francesca. Really good example. Black Lives Matter, the uprising, was a genuine popular uprising rebellion against a really critical problem that disproportionately was affecting Black people, but also in general affects poor people across the country. Because like you go to, like where I live, well, I'm in England at the moment, but where I live in America, in Springfield, Missouri, there's not that many Black people, but there's cops going around busting Geach and Skeeter in their bust up cars.
DJ and Squee.
It's like, hey, what you doing around here, baby? You better get out here, get me some of that stuff.
Still have a horrible Southern accent.
You don't like my Southern accent, baby? That's what. Well, it's not as bad, but
he's in England. His Southern accent's not going to get better.
Exactly. But the thing is, what is so tragic about Black Lives Matter? What is so tragic about the Women's March? Of all these things, is that people marched for freaking racial justice, and they ended up fucking spending more money on cops, right? All these things, and then there's a whole bunch of people who are able to milk that discourse to get themselves rich, whether it's with their freaking endless diversity training, which do not tackle racism, because if you have a successful diversity training business, you solve all the diversity problems, and then you're not needed anymore. So a lot of these like D'Angelo things and all these kind of things are premised that like you can't change racism. So we get a whole lot of people.
Hang on, I just want to time out about that, because like diversity training is such a like 90s term. I have a friend who does like anti-racist trainings for nonprofits, not really for corporations. Like there are shades of like anti-racist trainings, and they're not all bullshit. And I just want us to believe that like it's not all just trying to put like window dressing on like capitalism. And I just like, don't we know capitalism is racialized, right? Capitalism is racialized.
No.
It's gendered.
No.
Racial. We don't believe in racial capitalism on this show.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
All right. So we don't want to have
Because
Robin D.G. Kelly come on the show.
So you don't want who?
You don't want Robin D.G. Kelly up on your show?
Capitalism.
Not really. We used to talk about Hammer and Hoe.
Freedom Dreams, Hammer and Hoe.
Hammer and Hoe was
a good book.
Intro for Black Marxism, which basically
Hammer and Hoe was a good.
You don't want. So okay. So that's where we diverge. Robin is like a total idol of
We've
mine.
had multiple of his students and what do you call it? What's the word when you teach with someone, Gene?
Colleagues
on the show, and one of his colleagues got into a very large debate about the idea of racial capitalism. It's a hot term in academia that
I will say this.
I should leave. I'm gonna take my essentialist ass home.
No, this is my take. This is my take on like
Dylan.
Racial capitalism is on one level like very obvious, but on the other level it is kind of unnecessary, because of course capitalism by its very nature always creates excluded groups. Now obviously in the context of North America that has been racialized, right? But you look at Britain, Irish people and English people, they're all white people. The the kind of exclusionary hierarchy was based on ethnic difference, right? You go to the Middle East, they're all brown people, they all look similar, but again, you had a capitalism that was developed segmented. I think there's a tendency with a term like racial capitalism to project the particular ethno-religious uh, setup of capitalism which exists in the Americas, which is highly racialized and which is based around these racial categories which were given legal force,
Yeah.
and project that notion onto parts of the world where those kind of differences don't make sense. Good example is like, you want
yeah,
does
I
that
I
make
guess
sense?
I'm not applying that to like the specificities of like race and capitalism as it operated throughout Latin America and like colonialism and like everywhere colonialism differed, whether you were lucky enough to be colonized by the Spanish or the English, like depending, like shit was different. Your form of slavery and exploitation manifested itself differently. So I think it changes form in different areas. I'm not trying to say it's the exact same thing in every country. It's just something that I generally feel like, I mean, again, if you call it Robin D.G. Kelly, call it like, Bell Hooks, again, white supremacist, capitalist patriarchy. I have a difficult time unbraiding those things. And I feel like a lot of class essentialists in my life have looked at things, have basically like ignored my own experiences, ignored other people's experience, like Black women's experiences specifically, and been like, no, yeah, that doesn't matter. That's like so secondary.
No,
Maybe even a fifth. Maybe even like you can hang off the back of the, like.
And if I could, speak for a second,
Please
just
speak,
about
Marcus.
what
Love of God.
I've getting from is that on some part of this is just there's some language, some terms or descriptors that being used that kind of like are a little bit fluid, because it's not necessarily that there aren't that there isn't a training or multiple trainings, dozens, hundreds, thousands, who knows, that exists that teach people about the dynamics of racism in our society. And I think that the like probably the issue though is that a lot of those trainings, anything that's like anti-racist, is probably going to leave out some of those class dynamics that are just that capitalism will end up driving to in situations where it can, right? So like in the Americas, you do have these systems that develop racism, not so much like Gina pointed out in places where it was just, hey, all whites, oops, all whites, right? So but we still have to oppress someone. There's still got to be some hierarchical dynamic, right?
Well, it's like Kuba always tells this joke. We have a friend on the show, Kuba. He's Polish, and he came to like he's brought up in Canada, and he came to America to work, and like he's working for the Department of Defense or something. He's doing some dodgy, shady thing that Kuba does. We all know. That's why we call him decent. Anyway, he's working with this guy, an American guy with a German sounding surname, right? And Kuba, like the guy takes Kuba to the bar and starts talking to Kuba about how him and this guy with the German surname need to have like racial solidarity against the Black people. And he's like, dude, your people like built Auschwitz in my country. Like you what don't you do this team white business with me? People forget,
Kuba's from Poland, like he grew up.
He's from Poland, so he's like this cheeky German in America is trying to do racial solidarity with me. He's like, I don't have any Black people didn't come and invade Poland, did they?
Yeah.
So like, why? So
it's one of those, like Pascal always talks about the reserve army of labor and how Black people are regulated to the reserve army of labor. And there was an episode, I think it was in the Champagne Room, so sadly it was behind a paywall, where he tried to bring that up, and then Teray Reed brilliantly said, well, what about when that factory just closed in the Rust Belt, and now 4,800 white dudes are out of work? What are they? They are now the reserve army of labor. Is that racial capitalism? If I have to look at capitalism through the racialized lens, and this is where I have a problem with racial capitalism, Robin D.G. Kelly and all those cats are in universities. And I will say this, Hannah Appel, the work she's done, she's a colleague of Kelly's, with the Debt Collective, is beyond impressive because they got big time legislation done during Obama's term and during Trump's term when DeVos was in office.
Mhm.
Preface anything I say by that. I can disagree with someone and respect what they do and respect what they've accomplished. I respect Robin D.G. Kelly for the scholarship that he has written, especially with books like Hammer and Hoe. Amazing piece of work. The racial capitalism lens kind of feels like the hot thing to ride. And there was a lot of people in that world that rode that hot thing because now we have to look at capitalism strictly as it's racialized. How do I
Not strictly.
if I'm already looking at capitalism as a Negroid problem or as a Mexican problem, not as a capitalism problem? It is a capitalism problem. It is inherent in the system.
I think that and this is the last thing I'll say because I do have to bounce, but I think that for me, the real issue is not do we agree on the ideology, but how does that then inform the work, right? And how does that then either hamper the work or make us not work together or help us like sort of allow us to, and this is what I would say to some of the people I used to admire who are now basically, Tucker Carlson fucking dorklets who it's so much easier to be sort of lulled into a reactionary political position when you completely throw out identity politics, which is based in historic oppression and reality. And I feel like that's sort of the danger that I feel. It's like, how does it manifest currently? And I think that's my issue with it. Not to say that, you look at real union organizing, it is a multiracial class consciousness effort. You can't have one without the other. And hell yeah, there is racist shit that happens in union organizing. And yes, people have to deal with it, but they have to get up the next day and go forth and organize. They can't stop there and sit and do a whole class and, learn about it and get in their fifis and whatever. They might have a moment, whatever, but you have to move forward. So anyway, I'm just like, how does it inform the work rather than how can we reach some sort of ideological purity where we know we have the right answer? Because I think that's I don't like
Jason,
that.
Real quick, I want to say before Francesca goes, first of all, thank you so much for taking the time.
Nigga, what?
Oh, sorry. That was the wrong drop. It was supposed to be
Oh God, I'll take it.
this drop.
Thank you.
I want to say thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. I know it's early in the morning.
No,
everybody is able to get up early, so I definitely appreciate you. This is a fun conversation. For me personally, the fun conversations are when people can disagree respectively and not call each other names and everyone's a Russian bot and you're a pawn of the state. So I'm going to still watch your show. I'm going to still comment in the chat when I watch. And
oh yeah, please do.
Hey, a fruity conversation is always really good.
It's a fruit, but I want to say this to the point about anti-racism. We watched last night a movie called The Free State of Jones. I never seen it. I didn't care to see it. Adolph Reed and Cedric Johnson said it was a great movie. Pascal wanted to watch it for movie night. We watched it for movie night. And one thing Free State of Jones talks about is sometimes you may not have the perfect politics, but you can be on the right side of history. And during the Civil War, Newton Knight was his name, took kind of a band of black and white Confederate deserters and created this quote unquote Free State of Jones.
Mm-hmm.
Was this all because he understood the plight of the black man? Or was some of this because of necessity? These were the people that were there. They decided they were going to have a free state. And because it was a guerrilla warfare, two things they agreed upon. Everyone that's an adult with two legs is a man, meaning women are going to carry guns. Women are going to shoot people too. We are all in this together equally. Is that because he had some sort of Marxist vision? Or is that out of necessity? again, sometimes we can be on the right side of history without saying all the right things. And what unfortunately happens, as someone that has worked for a nonprofit and been in diversity trainings, probably not by your friend. And we do have a mutual friend in common in Josh Conor Russell. I got called a right winger because they were like, we need more black people in management positions. I was like, you hate homeless people and we work with homeless people. Every Negro, all y'all hate the people we service. So why do I want you in a management position?
I think
How
what the
do
issue
you understand the plight of the people if you've never been homeless and you can't stand these niggas?
I think part of the thing that like really kind of solves this issue is that when you go to things and movements that are serving directly working class people, and I'm going to go to the big thing that's happening right now with the Amazon labor movement and also the Starbucks unionization efforts, is the fact of the matter is these are just focused on jobs, right? But the people who are shining through it are people of color, are women, are non-binary, are trans, are all of the things. They got blue hair, they got the gold fronts, and they wear do-rags. All of the things,
Yes.
right? But none of that is. It's just the Amazon labor union. It's just the Starbucks union. That's it. But if you focus on working class people in this capitalist society that has ended up regulating all these people to the reserve army of labor, if you're focusing on that reserve army, then those identities are going to end up shining to the forefront. And it doesn't have to be an outwardly, hey, we're going to put Ketanji Brown on the Supreme Court. But we know that if you're not going to do that and, get rid of student loans and start guaranteeing some jobs, you're not actually serious about helping black women. Getting one black woman a fucking really good job doesn't really help all black women, right? But
she does have a really important job, though. So I will
it's
like
super
just to
hella
push back.
important, yeah.
Like it's kind of like a dope, very unique job.
But which would have been bigger, right? If they would have just put on some other white dude and also canceled 50K student loan debt or canceled all student loan debt, which would have been better?
Oh, that's a good one. Which would you do? Ketanji Brown on the Supreme Court or wipe student debt?
All right, this is where I leave.
That's a no-win question. Nice to meet you, Francesca.
Nice to meet you. If you guys like me, go to Franny Fio on YouTube. The Bitchuation Room is my podcast every Sunday, 5/8 Eastern. We stream live.
We have been putting links up to your show.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, I've noticed the name of your podcast before, and I really think it's a great name.
Thank you.
I was like, I wish I had thought of the Bitchuation Room, but I guess I'm doomed not to think.
Frantifada is another funny thing too.
Oh, Frantifa, yeah. Oh, but the Frantifada is good. That's my Mideast uprising is Frantifada. Frantifa is the Antifa.
Not as
but
good
for
as the
Franny.
Bitchuation Room. The Bitchuation Room.
She's good.
She's
She's got
got
the
podcast gold.
now.
Thank you guys.
Have a good day.
All right.
Thank you. The fun part about this, I hate this, Gene. Stop.
We still have female representation.
The fun part about this show is that sometimes you can respectfully disagree. And I didn't see a lot of the chat. I think people were saying some fucked up shit in the chat. I will say this as someone that's been on a show where I hated the fucking people that were in the chat. Don't be mean in the chat. Don't be mean. That's all I can say. Please don't be mean.
Yeah.
I think I might have cursed those people at one point on that show.
I don't know. I feel like there's like kind of like the dividing line of like how much of the forefront are you really like explicitly saying like this is for black people or this is for trans women, this is for like it's important to have like that there are spaces for any identity to be able to fucking commune, talk amongst themselves and do all those things, right? And like essentially when we kick Gene out, like this very much is like this, this it can be that as well. But
Okay,
but the thing is too is like, what are the limits to that, right? I think that's like kind of like where we're hitting, something with like the left kind of growing in the US is like, like I think part of what Francesca was trying to warn about was like going, into this area where you just say any, like any and all, lifting up of some type of fucking, like voice that's marginalized is some type of like fake and bullshit and shouldn't be talked about whatsoever. But I think also too of like getting some people to understand that if we're just focusing on working class people and poor people, you're going to end up with the marginalized communities because that's where society has relegated them to anyway. Yeah.
I'm not wholly unsympathetic to Francesca's position, especially as she's like in the online left and she's a media person, because there is some very weird tendencies that are disproportionately elevated on social media, including a quite pernicious sort of sect of uh, inverted commas conservative Marxists, anti-leftists, other reactionaries, functional reactionaries in that sense, who, there was actually an article in Compact magazine by the editor of Compact who made this argument explicit, which is basically saying that these are, the travails and issues that certain identity groups, and I don't really like that term, but certain identity groups suffer are just purely a kind of liberal issue and don't affect working class people, because there is a very concrete attempt by both the right and by liberals to detach questions of identity and personal emancipation from material conditions and material politics. And in that sense, the conservatives and the liberals are mirror images of each other. They're synthesis, their thesis and antithesis, in the sense that one side is like, oh, we just need to have more, more people of color, drone striking people in Afghanistan and we'll be fine. And then we have another one who are like, no, what's all this about? Why can't things be the way that they were before? And there's an implicit reaction against it. And there are people who get disgusted at liberalism for understandable reasons. Perhaps sometimes maybe they're opportunists, but sometimes maybe they're really chewed up by the system, by like the kind of toxic nature of left-wing politics and some of the kind of let's just say vanguardist Jacobin and sort of ideology around this woke
He
stuff.
gets one
Like,
editor job and now he's shitting on Jacobin. You're never going to let you write.
no, I'm not talking about Jacobin. I'm talking about Jacobins, the French Jacobins. Not the Jacobin, not the newspaper Jacobin.
We better tell Boschkar.
No offense to you, Bashkar, king of the left. The issue comes down to this: is both liberals and conservatives just want to just talk about these identity issues, whereas we on the left should be taking the position that we are for class politics and we're for freedom. And what freedom means is the freedom for people to live their lives, women to live their lives free of sexual harassment, free of discrimination, gay, lesbian, trans people, to be free of persecution and bullying in society. That is emancipation, but that emancipation cannot be disconnected from the material circumstances that leads to the exclusion of these people in society. And I'll give you a concrete example. What I find quite interesting, there's a lot of talk about trans sports, right? And it's kind of interesting because that's a very like marginal issue, I would say, for the majority of trans people. I would assume, especially in the United States, the biggest issue is that trans people are denied health care, number one. Number two, because of their exclusion from society, many of them are forced against their will into prostitution and the sex industry and things like that. That's there are major issues facing that. Probably different issues. I'm not expert on it. But focusing on the sports issue is a very bougie kind of thing, because we're dealing with like liberals who are like, no, we'll have trans sports people, and then conservatives who are like, oh, this is ridiculous. There's this totally hench trans woman who's going to punch the crap out of people. And then it becomes the entire discussion, and a very serious discussion we need to have about the way that trans people are treated in society is reduced to this kind of one hot button issue, which people are often not very like well informed on, or like and that doesn't affect people, right? So the culture war, what we should be doing on the left is like, yeah, sports, whatever, sort that out. Let's talk about the real issue, which is like trans people are like excluded from work, that they're forced into the sex industry, that they don't get the health care.
It's an easy argument to just tell people to shut up on. Look, what man is going to, in the minds of the people that are like, oh, they're just going to go in there and beat the shit out of women. What man wants to make exponentially less money to be a woman? There's not one female sport that will pay you more money. It pales in comparison. If you're 6'8" and can dunk, and you're like, I'm going to go put on a dress and be on the girls' team. Okay, I guess. And then what?
You make more money than D-League, homie. Damn.
Yeah. What are you trying to do?
No.
It's materially, it doesn't make sense. It's just a culture war issue for people that want to make it a culture war issue.
I think part of the issue, obviously, like maybe a problem is that, and by the way, even there's some reactions just to some of the ideas being tossed around. There's like there's a tough sell at some point, because like that the point, the point I was trying to make is that with having a black woman appointed to the Supreme Court, and what would be more effective? What would to helping black women?
You didn't cry? You didn't cry when she became
I welled up a little bit, but nothing.
Do you see this? Do you see this comment? Trans activism is a bunch of cis people putting their pronouns in their email when they send you a notice about how you didn't get the job.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a banger. That's a banger.
Yeah. That's a
banger.
Damn. That's like. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Wait, I gotta get the right one. I can't fuck up.
Here it comes.
Yeah, that was a dunk, man.
Yeah, but that's the thing though, is that we could hopefully live in a fucking world where like both things could be true, right? Where there's no separation between institutions of power and certain any type of group, whether based off gender, race, whatever. But then also like have actual policies and things that actually deliver to help the material conditions of working class people. The thing is that we currently, right, and that what the Democrats do is like only one of those things. They're only going to place the person in that high apparatus. And I think Pascal did a great job of even explaining how good of a pick, quote unquote, Ketanji Brown is. However, when she herself is explaining, she's only going to judge within the confines of the Constitution. And I think we all should realize the limits of what that means, right?
Puerto Rico. This week in Puerto Rico.
Okay, right. So that's the thing. That's the problem, is like, how do we actually have institutions that perform for all people regardless, and I think also too is like when Gene, the point that you made earlier is that the focusing on just identity is quickly and easily parried by the right, because they're always going to be able to find their Candace Owens or their Milo Yiannopoulos, even though he fucking got his balls zapped into fucking insanity. But like they're going to be able to find their fucking person to put out. And I mean, like, hell, like, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene and all the fucking things that she's doing. She openly says, no, women are the weaker sex, right? Like, there are people who will step up to the plate.
Have you ever heard Glenn Greenwald talk about certain homosexual people that he doesn't align with? He's rough.
Have you seen? Have you heard Glenn Greenwald talk to young men?
Yes, I have.
I sent you that, right?
I
don't know if it's true. I don't know if it's true. Did you see it?
But all of that, I'll say, all that aside, I think maybe for the people, for like the left, you know, for us, there might be even a better way of or like, how do you deliver that message of, like, you know, and that's like the sticking point, I think, right? Is like, how do you actually get through to that message, you know?
I'm always really concerned, right? Kuba put it a really good way the other night. He said, like, the problem is if we just focus on identity victimization, categorization, we end up with a society that is obsessed with who's the victim, and it leads us to a situation where white men will complain that they are the victims of society. And I think one of the problems when we think about politics, we think about it perhaps too much as a morality game. Like, well, what is right? And when you hear like white men bitching about it, about like being victims, you're like, oh my God, like what kind of ridiculous stuff is that? And that may all be very true. But if we're trying to build a coalition, that's a pretty big constituency that needs to be won over. And sometimes perhaps it's not about justice. It's not about like morality or whether it's fair or whether the discourse stuff, but it's about like what is politically effective and what will help people the most. You know, I was talking to someone today, and I was talking to them about, you know, why I was on the left. I don't see myself as a leftist because I think it makes me a good person. I'm good. I know plenty of conservatives who are much better people than me on a personal level, and who are much, you know, better, like do all the personal stuff that is much better. And I know leftists who are jerks, but my leftism is about like, I don't want to see a humanity that's destroying itself, and I don't want to see a barbaric society for myself and for my children and for my friends and for my family. And socialism and left-wing politics, I think, is the only pathway forwards for that. If that makes sense to you, you know, it's not about trying to be a good person. I mean, trying to be a good person is a separate thing. Like like Jason is a good person, right?
He's really not. He's kind of a fucking dick. But
don't you?
no.
Okay. Jason is T'Challa and you're Killmonger. That's what I'm deciding.
I'll take it.
Yeah. Jason is
yeah. And I think you make it because you make a good point. And also too, it's like the thing that are just true, right? Is that like you start talking about the statistics and racism in the United States, a lot of the times people talk about disproportionality, and that's because there's actually just, you know, by the numbers, right? There's like a fuck ton more white people in prison than there are black people. It's the disproportionality that makes this thing a fucking problem, you know. But then to completely like, I think that's my issue with some of the you know, liberal identity focus, is that you end up ignoring the the largest imprisoned and impoverished population, you know. And so and like how do you you know, it's like, and like, yeah, and there's like those like the white dudes in prison, like not all of them, you know, like racist, you know, capitalists themselves into prison, and they're like, oh, they fucking deserve it, you know what I'm saying? Like, if they're all like a bunch of fucking Scrooge McDucks fucking sitting in prison, like, fuck them. But like, that's just that's not the case, you know.
You want to fuck Scrooge McDuck? Like, that's what I'm getting from that. Like, why would you want to fuck Scrooge McDuck?
No, it's saying is that there's at the end of the day, it ignores just a bunch of poor people who happen to be in the fucking sector of white folks that didn't get, you know, didn't get their fucking top cut or whatever.
I hope people didn't piss Francesca off.
Yeah, people can be mean.
Now me and Pascal are never gonna get on that show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, like people are very people talk a lot of shit on the internet, and as Mike Tyson said, I think he said something about it. He said it's taught a lot of people that they think they can talk a lot of shit without getting punched in the face. And I think ultimately,
Oh my God.
Who
wait a
shit on the
second.
floor? Your son shit on the floor. Does all shit on the floor? Sarah, did he shit all on the floor?
Jason, no.
We're live.
Give me my baby. She's literally falling asleep in your arms with her head.
Oh, you're just mad at Gene for being an absentee father. Okay.
Poor baby.
I'm not an absentee
against
father.
the desk.
She was cuddled up with me asleep.
It was
she was
the
watching.
mouse pad. She was fine.
She was fine.
Her neck.
Her neck was fine.
You ever seen little babies go to sleep in the car seat and like, oh fuck, wake up all fucked up? Jean had her all.
But that's how babies sleep.
Yeah.
That's how babies sleep.
And gently put it back. Jean didn't do any of that shit. He was holding like a football.
Hey, she's a tough baby. She's like a bread roll. She's full of rolls and rolls around.
I
She's
almost
having a
threw
good
my
time.
nephew in the fireplace watching a football game. My nephew lived with my ex-wife and I. Her sister.
Like, what do you mean? What do you mean throw? Like pick up and throw?
Well, he was in my arms. And I was holding him like you were holding your baby. And it was a very important game between the Broncos and the Raiders. It was on a Monday night. I'll never
More
forget.
important than a baby.
People were at the house and they were like, Jason, you have to watch Khalil, who's my nephew. And I knew once we allowed my ex-wife's sister and her child to live in the house that I would be stuck with this child at some point. And I had children of my own.
Right.
That I didn't want to hold during a football game. And so I'm watching the game. And if you know me, I'm very intense about live games. And I think it was Brian Greasy threw an interception. And I didn't realize that young Khalil was not the football that I usually hold during the game. And I picked him up. And my friends, one of which comes on the show, Coach Will, grabbed Khalil quickly. No.
Jason spiked the baby. That's the
No. They grabbed the baby. They were like, no, you're not allowed to stand up. You have to sit down this whole time. So I have held a baby like I forgot the baby was here.
But my baby was fine. She was chilling. She was watching the show. Now Zal's up here. Someone's given him a Nerf shotgun. So he's going. It's better than when I gave him the foam sword and he just started beating people to death, beating with his foam sword.
Nuts. What else are you supposed to do with a sword?
That's true. So are we ready for our super stream tomorrow, Jason?
Super stream coming at you live.
Jason,
6 hours of
Doug Lane has decided for the launch of our new magazine, Sublation Magazine. Check out Sublation Magazine on Twitter at Submag, and you could also be at Submedia. And soon you'll be able to go to www.sublationmag.com. Very soon we'll be going live. But we're going to be doing a launch stream with Jason Miles and myself, and Doug Lane and the rest of the crew. We will have special guests coming in. I don't know which special guests are going to come in, but we do have some special guests. Some guests may be more special than other guests, but definitely me and Jason are not going to be sticking around for the full 6 hours.
No.
Doug can go do that by himself, but
Doug
Stefan's going to be there.
I'm definitely going to drop off my laundry, come back, get something to eat.
Sounds good.
It's Sunday. It's going to be a beautiful Sunday. Lobster Sunday.
What's lobsters? Do they have lobster where you are?
Oh, dude, the lobster place is down the street. We went and had lobster the other night. I did. I was a vegetarian in my house. Motherfuckers missing out. Anyway, that being said, so tomorrow, Jean Bajlan is telling the truth. starting at 9 a.m. Pacific time. We will be streaming for 6 hours for the Sublation Media Magazine launch. Jean Bajlan is one of the main. Are you? What is your title?
I'm the managing editor, and I kind of feel that is the coolest position, even if it is not the king position.
He is the assistant to the regional manager, and don't get it twisted. Jean Bajlan is kicking ass and taking names. And if you'd like to submit an article to Jean Bajlan, you can email him, man.
I still have I asked for. I was like, am I gonna get enough articles for this magazine? I asked a load of people, and now I have like so many articles I need to like read and edit and things like that. I'm like, I've got like a month's worth of articles to
you know what
splooge out.
sucks? You guys would know what sucks? Jean goes, oh, because a lot of the scripts before he left to the UK, I might add, Jean would edit the scripts for the video essays for me. And now he can't do it as much because he's busy, living his life and teaching at his job for these paying students. But anyway, Jean goes, oh, maybe I'll take one of the scripts and I'll edit it into a magazine article. And I was all excited that I was gonna be in the magazine. And
you're gonna be there. I just need time.
Like, yeah. Hey, Jean, you think you got time? He's like, man, motherfucker, check this out, homeboy. You are so far down the list of importance for me right now. I got real deal motherfuckers sending me articles, and you do not generate the clicks.
No, that's not the reason. I've got real deal web designer things to do with the web designer. So I was like, I can give everyone a little bit of a preview of our website if you wait a moment. You get a little bit of a Sublation Media.
You're not supposed to do that. Why don't you wait?
Oh, you don't want me to splooge out Sublation magazine?
Why do you keep saying splooge out there, Gene?
Splooge is my favorite word for describing a slow secretion of something, both in the abstract and in the concrete. So I believe splooge to splooge. It's actually what me and Sarah call hand sanitizer. Sarah goes, come on, put splooge on your hands. So now everything is about splooging. Splooged. I've just splooged everywhere. We've splooged the articles all over. We're going to splooge the articles out over time. But we've got exciting articles. We have some philosophy articles. We have some politics articles. We have an article about Pakistan, an article about animals and the way that we use the discourse of inhumanity. We have another article about why Warhammer is being taken out of the hands of the working class. We have another piece. We have an interview with Matt Christman. We have a whole load of exciting articles, both for launch and for the first week. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be an interesting project. And hopefully I will splooge many articles out in the future, and I will help Jason splooge his articles out into Sublation magazine.
Look, man, I got to write a script for the next Mondays.
You have to splooge out a script?
I got to splooge out the script, and I'm not going to have Bajlan to help me. He's gonna look at it real quick and be like, it's fine.
I never say that. I never say that. I said, I always go in and I'm like, Jason, you got to put full stops in places.
Jean is really good. Okay, what are you trying, Jason? What are you trying to say? If you can't say it to me in 2 sentences, then what do you mean? Yeah. And because Jean Bajlan says that to me all the time, like that, but with a British accent, that's how I think of everything when I come up with these ideas. So, Jean Bajlan, editor extraordinaire. If you Google him, it's author Jean Bajlan because he's written several leather-bound books.
Father extraordinaire as well.
Father.
He could put a baby to sleep on a desk, and I think
I literally did. You watched me do it.
Exactly.
You watched me do it.
Wait a minute. Someone is trying to win the comment war here.
Oh, it's a banger. So if you're listening, somebody just wrote, clearly Jason does not know much about periods, given he has all these kids.
That is hilarious. Well, guys, look,
Sands, nicely done, Sands.
Yeah, that was comment of the day. We need
that
Jason.
trans comment was pretty fucking funny.
That was on point. That was the
Which
hammer.
one?
Damn, that was funny.
The
Which one?
the one
The whole
about
thing about we use
Oh,
our
about the emails. That was a good one. Yeah, like
God damn, that was funny. Look, I want to send another shout out. Thank you so much, Francesca, for coming on. I knew this conversation would get people heated. I didn't know if it would be the panel or the listening audience, because I think people do view this through a very racialized lens, and it was a very. You can't talk about the LAPD and not talk about racism.
well, how was it before I splooged in the second half?
I didn't realize she was getting a little ticked off. We weren't. I don't think we tried to. I don't think we ever tried to tick anybody off.
No, but chat. If people are being rude in the chat, that's very distracting.
And I'm not. I can only see so much out of the corner of my eye, and it was actually moving pretty fast. And again, I know what it's like to have a chat tell you to fuck off and not listen to what you're saying, or totally disagree with you because you're not falling in line with what they think is the line of the show. So there will constantly be people on this show that don't quote unquote fall in line with the company line of the show. But I think Francesca's perspective is probably the perspective out in the real world. As Steve says, go outside and touch grass. You'll be surprised to hear what people have to say and what they don't know about your leftist credentials.
That's like if you go and organize, if you're organizing off of actions, right? If you know that there's good actions going on in your community and you join the organization that's doing those good actions, like you're going and like that's what I mean. You're gonna fucking run into people who don't have all the fucking perfect ideological takes. You're gonna find most people don't know who any of us are, who Jimmy Dore is, or who like they don't know, right? They don't know or give a shit. And the people that you're actually going to be helping in the community, they especially don't know and or give a shit.
And you might as well be one of these people. And if you do act like that, try to play that ideologically pure, hyper sectarian left game. You know what you sound like to normal people? You sound like exactly like a woke person, because you're just basically talking about you need to know these words and that words, and you need to behave this way and that way. If you want to even build anything, if you want to build anything concrete, even if it's very small, some kind of low action, you're going to have to work with normal people who don't give a shit about these issues. You can always, people should all, I don't think people should be shy about explaining their positions. You don't necessarily, you don't spread left wing ideas by hiding it, but at the same time, don't be a douche to people, and don't get angry at like left media people. We have respectful conversations on this channel. There is no, like the thing Jason says, the company line. We don't even really have a company line. We have like very different opinions coming on this show. Even within the core group, we've had some tussles in the past, right? All the core group have kind of like disagreed with each other quite vigorously on issues. And that's a good thing, because I think that makes for more interesting shows. One of the problems, I think, in left media, and this is probably true in all media, is that we are able, through our selection of YouTube channels and shows, to silo ourselves into a world where all these names are super important, and we think they're like changing the world and it matters, and who said what on Twitter is important, but that means nothing. And it's very easy to get dragged down a rabbit hole of inverted commas left-wing commentary about other left-wing commentary, which is kind of bullshit. People always go hate. There's always all these channels hating on, I don't know, like Majority Report. You know why I watch Majority Report from time to time? It's because they do long form interviews with people. I'm just interested in listening to someone talk about a book, and a lot of people don't like. A lot of people are not tuning in to like listen to something that they may or may not agree with, but rather are tuning in for a Jerry Springer / Maury Povich style your mama said, blah, 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 clip of some YouTube guy X, clip of YouTube guy Y, which I get it. It's a bit of fun. It's okay from time to time. But if that's your only diet, that's like eating Monster Munch for every dinner. Or I don't know what's you know, like
No,
yeah.
it's look, I did a video. Look, I'm gonna say this on this show. Hopefully, there seems to be a decent amount of people watching. I made a video essay over. It didn't happen right after we did that show, but it definitely happened after a show we did. Some people were saying actually kind of some mean things about those people, and people that I don't necessarily agree with or really like, but I don't think they are grifters, so to speak. I don't like that terminology. I don't really believe a lot of people are in this. There's con people because I don't think there's a lot of money to be made. It's like the transition. Ain't a lot of money to be made here. That being said, I did a video essay saying, is the online left a grift? And it has the least amount of views of all the video essays because basically everyone is involved in, oh damn, in the quote unquote grift, from the viewers to the people that they think are perpetrating it. And maybe it was a little too on the nose, but if you guys get a chance, check that out because I want to hear your opinions on it. What you think. Well, I'm wrong. If you really do think there are people out here trying to con you out of your $3 a month, because it really, you have to have a lot of people giving you money before you can really monetize a con. And of all the cons that make money quick, this ain't it.
Yeah, this is a really bad con to do. You know, if you want to make money quick on the internet, go play Fortnite really well. Or, I don't know, play a computer game.
I mean,
You'll
yeah.
probably have more fun. Like, I'm proud of the work we do here because my people on the show do the readings, right? And I think there's a lot of shows out there where they don't do the readings, where they just come on and they blather on about things. Like, I have no problem with anyone expressing their opinion on something, right? Everybody has the right to express their opinion. But if you're listening to people who do not do readings, who don't talk to people outside their silo, and who don't have any, conception of how to even understand things, to make an intelligent comment, then that's your fault. You need to assess why are you watching this, people. No, no offense to Vaush, all the Vaush fans, but why are you listening to Vaush and the guy what's the guy he debated? I briefly.
Is that the guy? Am I saying
No,
right?
Dylan Burns. Is this a guy? I don't know. Anyway, I turned it on. I was like, why are people watching this guy and this other guy debating about foreign policy? Why are they watching? Why are they watching these people? Go read a book or go online and listen to somebody who has specialist knowledge, whether it's a journalist, an academic, someone who lives in that country, someone who has some experience in that country. Why are you listening to freaking morons on the internet who play video games all day and look at the Wikipedia articles? You can look at the Wikipedia article yourself. Now, if you're just watching it because it's a shit show and it's entertaining, that's fine. But just admit that to yourself and don't pretend that you're actually doing some kind of political education. We do a little bit of drama stuff on this channel. We do a little bit of fun stuff on this channel. That's fine. I just have reading isn't classes. If you can't read, you can get the audiobook. And you can get them for free from your library. There you go. I've answered your question there. I just think people need to have a little bit more of a discerning diet of what they watch and spread around what they watch. Don't just listen to us, obviously.
Well, we
do
talked about it last night. We talked about it last night. There's no vetting in this world, right? And I really do believe that people believe, much like with music, that there is money to be made here. If you want to talk about grifting, then is every musician a grifter? Because these cats that you see performing aren't all doing it for the love. And I'm talking about at big rooms. They're doing it for a paycheck. Did a punk music, perfect example. They were so anti-everything until they got included in the system, and they had no problem playing corporate venues. They had no problem getting sponsorships from corporate companies. They had no problem taking the man's dough. If this was 10 years ago, a lot of these people that have podcasts would be trying to have a hot mixtape. I think it's something they're interested in, and
well, it's easy. I mean, hell, like that thing is like it's not even that, right? Because like a mixtape, that's even more difficult than just turning on the camera and speaking, right? So there's no, like I think part of the issue though is that people are entertained by it and then giving themselves the excuse. I don't think there's a whole lot of people, like Gene said, it's like, if you know this is just dog shit, like people watch WWE, right? Wrestling, like they know it's fake, but they know this is how they get their entertainment, and like that's it, that's all. I don't know that that's the case when it comes to like a lot of like the fucking debate bros and shit like that. But also too, I think where I'm hoping that this, that this show could be a part of is that what represents online media is not the left becoming online, or whatever the online left isn't the left now online. It is a subsect of just online figures who, talk about leftism maybe, or just claim themselves as a leftist and then say a whole bunch of shit. But what does the left look like online? We don't know yet. Hopefully we can make that real. But it's gonna be a whole lot more Chris Smalls and Starbucks workers than it is debate bros.
But just saying that, I just want to make everyone know. Please remember to try Raid Shadow Legends, where if you
please type in promo code This is Revolution. This on Raid Shadow Legends,
and get this new special character.
Yeah,
and you know what? Would you take the Raid Shadow Legends money, Jason? Would you take Raid Shadow Legends money?
What's Raid Shadow Legends?
Oh, you haven't watched enough internet.
It basically, we've gotten offers from Raid Shadow Legends.
What is it? I need to know.
It's a game. It's an online game that's just like super fucking predatory. I think I haven't played it, but it's like a phone game where like every 2 hits, it's like, would you like to spend money on this thing, right? But content creators, they'll send their mailers out to anyone and everyone about, hey, do you want to be, do ads for us, and you can get a promo code, and everyone that downloads Raid Shadow Legends, promo code This is Revolution, Jason Miles is a sexy bitch, hashtag 420, then you get $1.
Oh, you people don't want the answer to that question. Depending on the mood I'm in, and usually I just go whatever, right? And I said this on the stream last night for patrons only, and there was a small handful of people there. OnlyFans has been hitting us up to go on OnlyFans.
Wait, they want to get your backs out on OnlyFans, Jason.
Well, they just want the show.
Are they going to pay you?
I didn't even want to get into the conversation.
Why not?
Why not? What the hell's wrong with you, Jason? Go and ask him. We can have Jason's OnlyFans, and you get pictures of Marcus's topless. And
oh no, you have to get pictures of or the whole head, man. You got to get pictures of the sock puppet.
Yeah, pictures of Pascal's.
Well, I mean, that's like we talked about this. As far as like, which that's something that's like in and of itself, and there's something like Jason I've talked to like offline, but it's like and this is what we talk about versus is this online left or left online? Are a lot of the videos for the quote unquote left, are they actually reaching working class people? It's like the is like the black media and all of these things, or stuff like that. That's right. get him to the desk and put him to sleep.
Hey, look who it is. Say hi.
Haircut.
He's got a haircut.
He's got a haircut.
Yeah.
Oh my
He's got a haircut.
goodness.
You
Are
look
you
respectable,
handsome?
unlike your dad.
Are you Bogey? Bogey
What do you
Bogs?
say? Do you want to say something to Jason Miles? Say, oh dear. What? I don't know what he's saying.
This poor boy speaks so many
agree.
languages, he never knows what he's saying himself. And now he's got a British accent.
He's
the bourgeoisie.
Yeah, he's trying. He says also. He says potato. Say potato.
Potato.
There you go. Say cuddles. Say cuddles. He's been missing you guys. He's not a baby anymore though, is he?
He's a baby.
He's a man.
Phoenix
He's
called
a
me
giant
last
man.
night. He's a baby. Phoenix called me last night, mad that I wasn't the shark. So I had to do shark voices for him.
Look at you. You're already a broadcast star, son. Hey, Zal, say Mau the bourgeoisie.
Bourgeoisie.
There you go.
There it is.
There you go. You got an applause.
He got a applause. He liked that. He cheered for himself. I don't know what he's saying.
See, now you didn't
wanna
lost.
go play with your-
You got
you wanna go play
jammies
with your
on. You
friend?
know it's bedtime.
He went. Sarah came up. She's like, "Are you on with the? Are you on with the child?"
I think this is the kind of crazy terrorist nonsense that Jean teaches his child when no one's looking.
Yeah. There's like, I mean, like no one expected.
Yeah, that's not what Dogtanian says, Zal.
That's not what Doctor. Hey, can you sing the Dogtanian song for everybody? One for all.
Oh,
No one's gonna, I think
now we got
Okay, you go play with your truck now.
no one's gonna expect Zal, to have some boom boom packed in his little SpongeBob backpack when he drops it next to a Wells Fargo.
Yeah,
Oh, look at that little cute boy. Oh.
And he's like, well, we already discussed that Zal got shanked at nursery, but he's he got shanked at nursery.
Behind the paywall.
Behind the paywall about Zal. I got a phone call in the middle of the day. So for people who didn't hear it in the paywall, I got a phone call in the middle of the day. It's like, hello, is this Zal's dad? I said, yeah. It's like, so Zal's had a little accident. He was playing with his friends and he got stabbed with a fork. And I'm like, what? He's like, well, he had some cuddles and he's okay now. I was like, he got stabbed? He's like, yeah. So he was playing with his friend and he tried to touch his friend's Play-Doh and his friend stabbed him.
And that's when Jean showed up there yelling Allahu Akbar.
Yeah.
No, he
like,
was,
don't
no,
bring
I
a
thought it was
fucking fork to
teachable.
an AK fight.
I thought it was a teachable moment. You don't mess with another man's Play-Doh.
Yeah.
Unless you want to get
Jean, that's
shanked.
a teachable moment for that kid's dad. Don't turn your car on.
That's doing a racism.
Yes, Gene. We're gonna be doing a lot of them here tonight.
You've been doing a racism, but I thought the guest was a nice person, and I think it's pretty sad that people feel the need to be abusive. Like people need to be abusive because we have a nice chat, and we don't have one of the best things about doing this job is definitely not the money. It's meeting Jason and it's doing the chat. It's like getting to know all the chat people.
Look,
Yeah,
I tried to say it. I tried to say it early on in the show last night. I think there was only like maybe 10 or 12 people, if that watched the movie with us. I had so much fun. We talked about the movie last night. The movie was way better than I thought it was going to be. It was a very interesting story, and I think it really dovetailed nicely into a lot of the things that Francesca was saying, because when you sit in the world of racial capitalism and white supremacy, then it's really hard to organize in spaces because your verbiage in general is really, really what's the word I'm looking for, Gene?
It's like very obscure and obtuse, and there's a whole jargon of language that if you don't know that language, you're immediately condemned in a very unhelpful and unproductive way. I don't think that's universal. I don't think all woke people are like that, or things like that. I just think, especially online, people maybe go after each other too much for a
Yeah.
slip of the tongue, and people are just imperfect. People also might not have experience of things, and you have to like be a kinder person if you want to win people over. You're not going to win people over. This is how I feel. Like, I think a lot of the well-meaning people who developed these terminologies, they did it to help teach people and to help people learn. But what's happened to all this language is that it's been turned into a way not to help people learn, but to show that you're a better person than
Yeah.
another person.
Yeah.
And then, because like that, the line that really pisses me off the most is when people start talking about emotional labor, and it's not my job to teach you. No, it's like it's not your job to do anything. So get the fuck out of here. Like I hate that kind of attitude where people are like, and really it's like a complete commodification of interpersonal relations. It's always our jobs to teach each other, and that's like part of being a human and living in society. So if there's something that somebody doesn't understand, as long as they're not behaving unreasonably and demanding like a one-on-one tutorial with you like every day, it is your job to like maybe explain your position and why, like, maybe don't, I know you didn't mean to be offensive, but don't use the N-word. Maybe that's not
Yeah.
Stop calling
Well,
on
that's I think that's like part of the thing too, is that like
Stop
it's not
singing
like
DMX songs
yeah
in the office.
it's not like, Gene, you're against lessons or teachings. It's just like what are the teaching? What's the point of these certain like diversity trainings and stuff like that? Like and that's like really at the end of the day, it's like, are they actually teaching anyone anything to disrupt capitalism, to actually give somebody some type of liberatory fucking information and knowledge? Like, no, it's about how you get along within the system, right? Within this
And that shit really
corporation.
isn't, that stuff really is a grift.
Yeah,
Right? Because
right.
that stuff really is a grift, because we are creating an entire infrastructure of NGOs, some of which may be better, some of which may be worse, some of which may be more sincere, and some of which may be more, let's just say, grifty, but an entire infrastructure that is incentivized to perpetuate racial tensions in this country so that they can continue to exist and provide services and provide the intellectuals required to sell those services to companies, government institutions, and things like that. It's good money, man. It's good money. And you
Yeah.
see this, you see these trainings where they have this woman, it's like, I'm a blah blah, I'm a black woman, here's my PayPal, so PayPal me money. It's like, what the hell is this? How is that?
Yeah, I think that's like part of like maybe the issue, at least on the show, is like it was like the like, I don't think you're discrediting any and all type of like training that might try to like tie people in on like the history of racism, but it's just that, like, yeah, what do most people get? And also too, it's like I guess it was like, is even the discussion of like the diversity trainings is like, is this just even a conversation within the culture war? Like, are
It's a
people
culture war
really
but
are people
more,
really bitching about this? Like, are workers really bitching about this? Their 30-minute training they got to do every 6 months, like that, like, because like at the end of the day too, is like, I feel like this is one of those things where housing, food security,
look,
healthcare, like, are going to be
Well,
the bottom line, right?
it's more of a PMC thing, because like the way
Yeah.
I see it is that obviously all these sensitivity trainings, they're always all going to managers and academia and places like that. That's where all the money is anyway. Nobody's getting paid to do a racial sensitivity training for the people cleaning the toilets at the Hilton Hotel. So it's all about management, and frankly, a lot of this racial discourse, because it is untethered from materialist politics,
Totally.
because it's been totally untethered. It literally is mobilized by people to build a competitive advantage in an increasingly competitive labor market. Like you're competing for a managerial job. What is your competitive advantage? I'm a black person. You don't have any black people. You should hire me because that's my competitive advantage, because you
Here's
need
a true
diversity.
story. Here's a true story. This was originally the trigger warning. Abercrombie and Fitch has a documentary. Abercrombie and Fitch was pretty racist. And when they started to get sued because they were literally telling black employees. One young lady said, they always had me work late shifts, and I had to clean the windows, right? The late shifts is when you have to do a lot of the cleaning. And I switched shifts with another worker because I couldn't make the late shift, and I could make this other early shift, and it worked out between the both of us. So we switched shifts, and the manager got mad at me. And I told the manager, well, really all I do is clean windows anyway, so she can clean windows. And the manager told me, but you're so good at cleaning windows, to the only black employee. A Filipino guy was working for the holidays, and when it came time to hire people full time, he was a good worker, quote unquote, and he didn't get hired. And when he said, well, what's the deal? They're like, we have too many Filipinos. You got a fucking quota? So these cats found out that kind of around the country, people were having these racialized problems. So they sued Abercrombie and Fitch. Abercrombie and Fitch took this case all the way to the Supreme Court. And what ended up happening was they were like, we didn't not hire you or fire you, because ultimately you just didn't show up for your shift. We didn't schedule you anymore. It was because you're ugly, not because you're colored. Oh. So they started to have positions for people to stay in the back. You're a person of color. And people in the front, you probably look like the models. You're probably white. Abercrombie and Fitch then hired a diversity manager, black guy. And he's like, well, my time there, the workforce was 3% black. By the time I left, it was like 80% diversified. So nothing really changed. I just learned how to be racist better. So when we say words like inclusion is important, we can look at Abercrombie and Fitch as an example of racial capitalism, if you like to. But again, when I start saying words like that and I start having these diversity trainings, a lot of white people tune the fuck out, because I don't know too many white people, and I don't know too many people here that know white people that will admit that they are racist, that will come out and say, I actually hate N-words. I literally hate Mexicans. I literally hate Arabs. I literally hate. I hate them. There's not too many that come out and say that. I've said it before on the show, only twice in my life, and I've been around this rock a few times, and I've been to all the places. Only twice in my life, someone literally looked at me and was like, because you are who you are, I do not want you here. There's not too many people that feel they are racist. And when you watch these videos, they're comical. It's some guy saying, hey, Janet, nice tits. Maybe that happens at a restaurant. I'm sure it happens at a restaurant. I know for a fact it happens at restaurant work. I know for a fact it happens in lower levels of jobs.
But those people ain't getting diversity trainings. like you don't give a fucking diversity.
When we go back to that whole trans statement about pronouns in the email, just to tell you didn't get the job, that's a bigger deal. That's a bigger deal, in my opinion, than just how to now talk to your black employee. You know what? You don't tell Jerome that you want to touch his hair. That's diversity training in a nutshell.
Well, at least you don't have that problem. No one has to touch your hair.
It is annoying as
Well,
fuck.
they
I
do,
gotta say
Jake.
that shit. Like that like white people just can be like, oh my god.
You know, I had a colleague. I had a colleague who went to. We had some mandatory training about, like racial diversity training, and she told me it was like the most insane because it was like well-meaning middle class Midwestern women being neurotic about saying, "I said the black girl looked nice. Was I being racist? Her hair looked. I said her hair looked really. It's like you can tell a black woman her hair looks nice. It's fine." But also, maybe just don't comment on people's appearances when you're at work, unless they're like totally like not dressed appropriately for work. I mean, if you come in, you're like,
Yeah.
It's Janet. Someone said
that's what we call
all-
Pascal around the
Well,
office
and that's
anyway.
yeah, and like that's sort of too. It's like that's what like, I think you're gonna get in this response of like the fucking these loud idiots where, oh well, I can't comment on Janice Knight's ass anymore at the fucking office, and it's like, yeah, dude, yeah, like you just shut the fuck up, like you just and like you said, like maybe just do not comment on people's appearance, and like this thing is like, oh hey, you've got blood on your shirt, man. You like, have you been stabbed? Like Zal, did you touch somebody's fucking Play-Doh again? You know, like that's one thing, but like no
Zal's
one
sitting
cares.
there. Zal's sitting there listeling to you, loading his Nerf shotgun.
Well, to make sure he's like, I'm gonna take that
with
Play-Doh.
vengeance in his eyes. Hey, I'll tell you guys a real story. And I have to be as vague as possible. Have a friend works at court, and there was a person in the court, a judge, that was extremely inappropriate. Like, let's stop this guy before we get a lawsuit on our hands. These people get moved around. They don't get fired. Do you think a diversity training is going to stop him from saying highly offensively inappropriate things and even getting in relationships with his staff, which is also highly inappropriate? There's real problems in real places, and those things aren't addressed. We really don't address power with the
which
like how to be a better racist,
how to hide your racism,
how to hide your misogyny. That's what it is. How to tell Janet that you want to bang without telling Janet that you want to bang.
And it's not to say like, I mean, I'd say, yeah, obviously like anarchists would like completely hold this, it's not to say like you can do away with all types of like power, all types of hierarchy, but I think, correct me if I'm wrong, was like you got to spread that shit out a whole lot more than what it is right now, right? And there's like certain things just to be taken off the fucking table when you talk about what people need, housing, food, economic opportunity, and XYZ, and that like leads to the ability for people. But really, though, it's like those things in the individual workplace, those still do need to be get addressed. It's just are the extent are these workplace problems actually a societal problem, and that's when you come into like in the face of climate change, and like maybe not so much, but at the end of the day though, it's like treating people with respect is important, just baseline, but our society isn't even geared towards doing that in reality. You know what I'm saying? Like just the amount of disparity is inhumane disrespect, and so just kind of focusing on these like rhetorical positions, it seems like a negation of what's actually happening on the ground, even if it can't be a problem itself, right?
It's easy. It's easy. It's an easy fix, right? Just it's like when when you were a kid and you like did something bad and you were just like sorry. It's like just some words, right? Like if you can say the magical words, and you can go to Ibram X Kendi and get your like blessing from him that you aren't a racist for the next 6 months, but you have to come back and fill up on anti-racism for another 6 months, $99.99. That's easy to fix, right? It's easy for an institution to like hire a bunch of people just to do like diversity talks, or dump a bunch of money to some black person in the company and say that they've done their bit to end.
Another thing about that Abercrombie and Fitch documentary, Gene, you were either in Iraq or the UK when this happened, like 2003. Abercrombie and Fitch had these, they had these shirts, and they were just crapping out T-shirts, and they say it on the doc. They say, we made more money on T-shirts because the margin was so high. It cost us nothing to produce, and we sold them for so much money. They had a T-shirt that said, West Virginia, this gene pool has no lifeguard. They had these racist, they had a bunch of racist shirts about Latin people. Then they had a racist shirt that said, 2 Wongs make it white. Wongs dry cleaning, with a picture of a stereotypical Chinese male.
My God.
Dig this. Wait, it gets better.
For real? Is that for real?
It gets better. This gets so much better because I remember this oh so vivid. The Asian community in San Francisco blew up because we had a big footprint store. And also, for those of you that know, those footprint stores, hemorrhage money. It's just selling ad space. So anyway, this big footprint store of Abercrombie and Fitch in downtown San Francisco on the corner of, what is it, Market and Powell. You guys know where it is in the city. Right there where the cable cars end. They had tons of Asian people like, hey, this is fucked up. Abercrombie and Fitch backs off. But what's the first thing they say? Well, a reason why those shirts got made and got signed off on was because there were Asian people designing them. And we didn't think that was a problem.
Avocado.
When that was proposed, when that was shown to the dude that was behind the pushback of Abercrombie, behind all these protests, he was like, well, when you're the only Asian people in the room and there's white people and blah, 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 this is 2000. This is a very apolitical time, and anger as humor is selling. Howard Stern, Rush Limbaugh, these are the kings of radio. We're watching people eat worms on TV and Joe Rogan make fun of them as they're doing it. Punked is a TV show. So we are at a very, I'm not saying it's just, but I understand why some guys probably smoking mad pot in the room, just shitting out T-shirts designs that are all highly offensive, didn't see a problem with it. As long as the check's cashing, people won't really see a problem with it. And again, it's not like the company itself stopped being racist. They still kept black people and other minorities that they felt weren't pretty enough in the back of the store, even after they apologized for their accidental racism. Kind of.
Sorry, not sorry, racism.
Yeah. That's kind of what it is. Like, look, man, what are you really trying to do with your complaint? Do you want to get the shirts? They'll end those shirts real quick and make some kind of similar.
Yeah.
We just had got done before Abercrombie and Fitch. There was a company called Big Johnson that every shirt was a misogynistic dick joke sold to 12-year-olds.
That's pretty funny.
Oh shit, Lex. Oh right, yeah, that makes sense.
Facts don't
So
care.
Abercrombie and Fitch is at least at the time their headquarters at Columbus.
Yes,
but then a lot of like Lex Wexner, who was tied to Harvey Weinstein, and actually people say it's like he was the money behind Epstein, or at least a large chunk of it. But I mean, like the Ohio State Hospital is named after this dude. Like, so the fact that because and actually too was it Victoria's Secret?
Yep.
Did he own that too?
He started, basically Wexner bought all these mall stores, and what he did was, if you remember, and you guys might not remember this, and I can't say what the UK looked like back in the 80s, malls originally we're going to replace the kind of downtowns in middle America, right? In small town cities, there was always a downtown area where people went shopping. So malls were going to replace that with indoors. So there used to be a lot of, you had your bookend stores, or what they're called. So those are the bigger department stores. So Sears, Montgomery Ward's, JCPenney, later Macy's, Nordstrom. Those are called bookend stores, right? And then you had smaller stores, which generally were smaller mom and pop stores. What Wexner did was he started to build chains out of those stores and start branding these smaller things that he saw. So the Limited is one, Victoria's Secret is another, Express is another. So those also started to become bookend stores in malls. What a great business model, right? You're building malls in every suburban enclave in the country. Why not? And you know that the major stores are going to be in there, but they pay a different rent. Right? It's just such a different price per square foot when you have that much space. What if I can take the small mom and pop space, but sell it as high fashion? And he bought Abercrombie and Fitch because it was a failing company that kind of was a sporting company. And they turned it around into a young person's lifestyle brand. And they don't talk about this in the documentary, but as we loosen up regulations on credit, young people at this time are getting credit a lot easier than before. So once you turn 18, a lot of people are getting credit cards. So why not hit up this population that finally got the permission to spend? So that's why you see kind of this mall outgrowth in the mid to late 90s and early 2000s for stores that are really, really aimed at that demographic. And Abercrombie and Fitch kind of nailed that audience maybe better than anyone. Enough to have a documentary made about them. I don't see the Pac Sun documentary coming out anytime soon, or the Journeys. But it's an interesting. I was gonna play you the trailer just to piss you off, Marcus, because it was definitely anger inducing. But I decided not to.
Oh, okay, yeah. Word. All good.
And then I found something else to piss you off that was equally as funny. A movie called Miami Connection, which is amazing. But on that note, let's go ahead and end, as we're talking about the LA riots, with one of the major situations that caused the riots: municipal politics and law enforcement. This is a throwback to a show we did with a student of Robin D.G. Kelly, who also is coming back on the show, Max Felker-Cantor.
Excessive use of force by Los Angeles police or understandable reaction in self-defense. The answers involve larger questions about police practices, news organizations, and the responsibility of citizens. Terry Drinkwater reports.
Eula Love was a 39-year-old widow who was gunned down by LAPD in 1979. After the death of Love's husband from sickle cell anemia 6 months earlier, it became hard for her to make ends meet and support their 3 daughters. On the day of the shooting, Love had an altercation with the representative from the gas company that was sent to her home to collect an overdue bill. After Love went to a store to cash a check to pay the bill, Love got home to find another person from the gas company who had called the police on her. Frustrated, Love went in her home and came out with a butcher knife. The police shot her 12 times, killing her instantly.
The American Civil Liberties Union says that in the last 4 years, officers here have shot over 300 people, killing nearly half of them.
We're no longer going to stand aside and let the police department shoot our people down in cold-blooded murder.
But the district attorney investigated the Eula Love shooting and decided not to prosecute the officers, calling their action justifiable homicide in their own self-defense. Police Chief Daryl Gates.
I think it's about time that we say something about the responsibility of people in this community not to solve their problems with violence, because violence begets violence. And that's what Eula Love did on this occasion.
But Mayor...
The fight against police violence has become a central part of the political discourse in contemporary America post-George Floyd. The slogan, Defund the Police, came about in the wake of that George Floyd moment. Remedies from police cameras, challenging police unions, and tampering down the use of the police officer's Bill of Rights have been suggested to cut down on the numbers of police killings of unarmed civilians. But there are institutional mechanisms that entrench police representation in the upper echelons of municipal governments that also have a strong role in providing cover for police when they abuse their power and cause harm to civilians. In this episode, we will ask, how does municipal politics help shield police from accountability? This is Revolution.
Mayor Bradley's police commission concluded just the opposite, saying the officers were premature in drawing their weapons. Chief Gates says that finding devastated morale in his department. And in defense of his men, the chief has gone on the attack, suggesting there's a conspiracy against those who uphold law and order. In a closed-circuit TV address to the department, he placed the blame generally on the media.
We don't need a problem because we know what all that's going to be. You would need somebody else to rubber stamp and stuff. We don't need this kind. We ain't down here talking about no high positions and stuff like that. The people going to get justice, and it's going to be in the street.
The police cannot police themselves, nor can the district attorney's office, who works daily hand in hand with the Los Angeles Police Department, prosecuting citizens for alleged misconduct, then changes hats and becomes the investigator and prosecutor of the police accused of misconduct, sometimes by the same citizens themselves. Thirdly, this police commission, this citizens police commission, I don't believe it can do the job.
Yes, sir. Completely structured cage, bars, another buzz door to get in over this place. When we went in, there was a gun next to the teller window, which is what I describe it as, because it reminded me of a bank. You know, you buy your thing into a tray and you get your drugs out through the tray. But it was quite a place.
How these neighbors, they must feel glad to see this.
Most of them are, yeah. They're the ones that call for complaints.
Are they?
Yeah. As a matter of fact, they call back later and say, after the day after the investigation, I had a number of calls saying, good job, you did a great job, you know. And as a matter of fact, the guy that's really supplying the place, this is the information about him. So there is a lot of cooperation.
Yeah. Their neighborhood, little kids.
Oh, yeah. Sad.
You know, kids, you see the kids going by every day, and the kids see it. They want something done.
Yeah.
They let us know. Then we have to be real careful because we can't let everybody know. Otherwise, their life.
Plus, the message that people that run this place are making is that, you know, we know you know we're here, but you can't get in to get us. You know, and that just is unacceptable as far as I'm concerned.
As President knows, having looked at this, seeing what the local police did, what can a president do about this?
Well, I'm going to be speaking about that in a little bit and later on too. Some very good ideas today from a lot of the people that are out on the front lines in this fight.
How does this tour, though, influence your ideas?
Well, it influences my ideas because I'm talking to people that are actually out there waging the battle. And you learn from it, and it brings it home dramatically, whether it's the chief of police or whether it's a guy out here making this kind of a bust and break-in, physically coming in to relieve a neighborhood of this kind of filth. I mean, you can't help but feel that way. Anybody that has practical experience, you learn more from that. And it's not show business, it's trying to learn and understand and then take action. And that's what I want to do if I'm elected, and this is extraordinarily helpful to me.
That I'm not sure we were heard on, and I want to make this clear, but it is our point that there's no reason for the police department to be fearful of input from our community. That alone shows a lack of a proper understanding of the role our community should play in the policing of our community.
It's good shit.
Yeah, that was an older clip. But to really understand the riots, I think you have to understand Los Angeles, and you have to understand the police force, the power that police chiefs had historically, the tree of chief that Daryl Gates comes from, his goal to be governor.
Sounds
It's very much understand everything when we talk about those riots. It's simply not just Rodney King.
A lot of tension in the barrel, and that was the match that started it all off, right?
Oh yeah, it was actually showing the world what a lot of people had been facing for well over a decade when it came to the brutality of the police in their neighborhoods. And then, you know, couple that with some kind of severe gang violence at the time, because again, we have to talk about the violent nature of protecting your income revenue stream with the explosion of so much cheap cocaine through the West Coast. So let's remember everything in context. Garcetti, let's remember political dynasties.
Yes, yeah.
Let's remember it all, and let's work on changing people's material conditions. And on that note, we are out. See you guys tomorrow.